Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. Tony Khan this week hired another outlaw freak who used to be a sideshow geek, then robbed a bank. It is the Jim Cornette Experience, and I am, of course, Jim Cornette, and joining me, my co-host. He's a musical genius. It would have been Emerson Last and Palmer, but he wouldn't take second billing. The great Brian Last, everybody.
Aloha, Jim. A pleasure to be here once again. To hear you butcher a song here at the start of the show. But we're gonna have fun this week. Lots of fun.
I'm a very musical kind of guy. Oh, I'm whistling Dixie out my ass today. What a week it's been. What's the matter with you? What were you gonna say?
I can kind of see you doing like a whole barbershop quartet kind of thing. When you say you're a musical kind of guy, I can't see you singing. I can't see you playing a guitar. Yeah. I mean, it would be funny, but I can't see it. Yeah. But I could see you singing with a barbershop quartet.
You've got the AIDS. It's full-blown AIDS. Did you ever see that Family Guy?
I don't know what you're singing. No, I did not see that episode.
The barbershop choir comes in and reveals the diagnosis to, I think it was Peter, that he's got AIDS. You've got the AIDS, not HIV, but full-blown AIDS. The barbershop quartet there.
Did you ever hear the Tiny Tim comeback album from, I think, the late 80s?
I didn't know he came back.
Well, I think it's a comeback album, but it's him covering, like, I don't even know if you want to say heavy metal, but hard rock songs, like Billy Idol and different things. And he also has his own song. It's a Christmas themed song called Santa Claus Has Got the AIDS This Year. Not AIDS, the AIDS. It's like Gary Hart wrote the song. Santa Claus has got the AIDS this year. And it's so awful.
With a B-side of Would You Like Some Corn, brother?
You know, it's like, this is the most tasteless thing ever. And it's Tiny Tim. But anyway, since you started talking about
there you go. And of course, there is Richard Cheese. You've heard Richard Cheese.
I don't know.
Oh, he does lounge singer versions of hard rock and or other types of music that you would not think would get the lounge singer treatment. He's very entertaining. Richard Cheese.
I don't understand what you're saying. Are you saying that you see yourself as more of a lounge singer than a barbershop quartet?
No, I was just mentioning, since along the lines of what you said with Tiny Tim doing death metal or whatever, that Richard Cheese did a similar thing in a similar vein as what you were talking about. I do not view myself as a lounge singer. No, maybe a lounge lizard, but not a lounge singer.
I think in the late 90s, Pat Boone did like a heavy metal record, actually.
I thought you were going to say Pat Benatar. I was Pat Boone.
Oh, that would make sense. That would be logical.
That would make sense. What about if Pat Benatar did the white people's cover of Tutti Frutti like Pat Boone did, and Pat Boone did Heartbreaker? That would be interesting.
That would be interesting.
Nevertheless, I've had a shitty week. Brian, I'll have you know. Do you know we've got air quality alerts here in Louisville, Kentucky? Have you heard about this? It's in all the papers.
I have not seen it in the papers up here.
You have not said they're not talking about the air in Louisville. We've had air quality alerts for several days. It's a smog, a haze, a mist across the entire metropolitan area and indeed across the entire region. We are getting the wildfire smoke from the wildfires in California. It's turning the sunrise and the sunset red, and it's like when you look out, it looks like it's fog, but it's not. It's a haze, even in broad daylight. And you can see, and also people are having respiratory issues, and they're saying severe allergy symptoms and wheezing and sneezing and snotting about, including me. I can tell every morning. It's like standing 25 feet from a bonfire when you walk outside. If you do not need to be out, and also it's hot and it's dry, and the meteorologist explained this. I will not try to. But the smoke in the air and the atmosphere is keeping it from raining. So for the last 3 years, I've been battling the rain. 2 of the 3 years were the two of the wettest years we ever had on record to get my outdoor projects done. And now that I've planted grass and things and want the rain, it will not come. So I got that working against me.
I could see you kind of going for the whole end of the world bunker kind of thing. Have you ever thought about a bunker?
Actually, there is a large cistern underneath, because we didn't used to here many years ago have what they call city water. There wasn't no city water out here. So we had a big cistern, and I've been thinking about converting that into somewhat of a bomb/Republican shelter, just in case they take over again. But I haven't had the modifications done yet that would be required.
All right. Good idea. I like it.
So see, we're thinking along the same lines.
It's a good idea.
Here's another thing I'm going to tell everybody don't do. Do not patronize the people that I'm about to talk about. And we should have known. And here's the thing. And they're not even a sponsor this week, but one of our fine members of our family of sponsors is Omaha Steaks. And they ship out the beef, and they ship out the burgers, and they ship out the dogs and the chicken and the desserts and the sides. And it comes in a wonderfully professional styrofoam cooler with the cooling thing and everything, and it's frozen. You could use these New York strips when you get them. You could put them in a sock and use them for one of Santana and Ortiz's Mad Balls. They're frozen harder than a banker's heart, right? But we made a mistake, Brian. We did not follow our own advice here at the castle last week before actually now that this has been going on. We did not follow our own advice and only patronize our fine family of sponsors. No, instead, Stacy was talking, I believe it was her sister, who said, oh, you got to try this. You got a thing called Butcher Box. Have you heard about this?
No.
Run fleeing in the streets if you do. Her sister said, you got to try this. I don't know if she even had a coupon, or she said, I'll buy it for you. It's just get what you want. One of those type of deals. Okay, why not? Butcher Box claims that they deliver high quality meats and things, packed on ice. All you got to do is cook them. Same drill. Okay, so to acquiesce, she goes outlaw. She goes outside the family of sponsors. She buys from Butcher Box. And then I didn't even know about this until a couple of days later. She's sitting there going, wait a minute. Where's my meat I ordered? I said, what do you mean? And then she tells me, well, the Butcher Box. I said, well, where is it? And she said, I ordered it a couple of days ago, 2 or 3 days ago. And they sent her a tracking. So she pulls it up on her phone. And they have sent this box of frozen meat foodstuffs from Delaware, Federal Express, which I allegedly thought was overnight. It went from Delaware to Pennsylvania to somewhere in Ohio, over to Indianapolis, and at that time was headed on its way back over to the greater Cincinnati area. And it had been out for 3 days. And I'm like, what the fuck? And then it arrives the following 4-day overnight delivery of frozen foodstuffs, high quality meat. And it gets here and she opens it up. And it's also the middle of summertime. And the FedEx driver left it sitting for at least an hour down by the gate instead of actually bringing, when it plainly says on the box, frozen food shit, right? So it's been 4 days. So she opens a package. And goddamn, you can smell it, right? It's halfway cooked anyway by the time it's taken this journey. So she gets mad. We've been screwed here. And she's going to call them and vent her spleen and give them the talking to that they deserve. And she wads this rotten meat up and throws it in the garbage. Well, and I innocently come by later on and grab the garbage bag from the kitchen and take it outside and put it in the large garbage can that goes to the road, right? Did I mention it's the middle of the summer? More on that later. So anyway, she calls them up and they say, we're so sorry. We'll replace this right away. Okay. So meanwhile, they're sending another package out. I don't know that this stuff is unwrapped and in the garbage, and I put it outside so it cooks in the 90-degree weather for a couple days. And I walk out there to go to get something out of the car, and I start, what? Jesus Christ. There's shit living now in the bottom of the garbage bucket. Meanwhile, I say, where's this replacement box of fine meat and foodstuffs? She gets the fucking phone, looks at the tracking. It went from Delaware to Pennsylvania over to Ohio. What the fuck? It took 4 days for the replacement box to show up. And by then it was melted too. And it says clearly on their box, do not consume if this is over 40 degrees, the food, call such and such immediately. And so she called such and such immediately and said, I don't want no more food. I don't want no more foodstuffs, no more meat, no more boxes sent from Delaware to Pennsylvania to Indiana or Ohio. I just want my goddamn money back. So they've sent her her money back. And now I had to pay the Monroe brothers an extra $50 to take that garbage bucket across the road into the woods with a fucking hoe and a hose. Well, they couldn't get the hose across the road. They had to take the hoe across the road. Brian, you've heard the old saying, why does a hoe cross the road? To dig out the maggots out of the bottom of the garbage bucket. And then come back with the hose and everything, blah, blah, blah. So they not only sent 2 frozen boxes of fine foodstuffs on a round-trip Midwestern journey to get here 4 days, twice in a row, and sent me 2 rotten boxes of meat, but I ended up having to spend money to get my goddamn garbage bucket cleaned out. Butcher box. Fine foodstuffs. Stick with Omaha Steaks, folks.
Yeah, and by the way, for the record, you can go to omahasteaks.com, put JCE in the search bar, and get a great deal on something. I don't know what, because we weren't planning on plugging them this week.
Yeah.
But put JCE in the search bar, omahasteaks.com, get a great deal.
And they weren't even paying for that. I feel so, it's like I cheated. You know, we should have known, never go outside the family. They'll take care of us. These other people. I felt like Gordon Ramsay. Well, you could kill somebody. Anyway, speaking of killing somebody, with kindness, of course, we had a segment on the previous program that we did. That was your show, right? The drive-through. Right now, we do these shows so often now that we just refer back to each of them individually. And if you're not listening to both, then you're losing out because you won't understand what's going on. These are not self-contained episodic programs. We bridge the drive-through and the experience, right? So listen to both. What else you got to do? Anyway, we had a recent segment, and a reader sent some feedback, and I will just read the reader's feedback from Sean. Hello, Jim and Brian. My name is Sean. I'm a longtime listener, and I never miss an episode. I'm emailing you to share with you my theory on what's happened to Dave Meltzer. Essentially, wrestling has declined so much that the only people left are this generation of wrestlers who grew up reading The Observer and want to cater to him specifically to get rave reviews. Because of this, Dave now feels like he's finally an important person within the wrestling business. Think about it, Jim. You yourself have said that if you asked what the boys in the 80s and 90s what they thought of Meltzer's opinions, they would have just blown snot and walked away. No one cared. But here we are decades later, and now that all the marks are in the ring, they care about little else but getting 5 stars in The Observer because they grew up dreaming of being praised by Dave. The dumb schmucks even have a finishing move named after him. I believe this is why Dave defends these people so vociferously and is willing to sacrifice friendships that go back decades for them. It's why he gives AEW comedy crap more stars than he gave to Hogan versus Rock at WrestleMania 18. It's why he says things like the dumb schmucks are the new Midnight Express. Because after so many years of being ignored by the boys, this generation makes him finally feel like a respected and accepted critic. Basically, this is Meltzer's revenge. Dun, dun, dun. I'm still leaning toward the medication thing.
I don't know about either of those two options. I'm not sure about either of those two options. I do want to make a correction, though, Jim.
Oh, you do?
I mentioned last time that
you were wrong, not me. Are you correcting something
I'm
I
correcting
did?
I'm correcting something I said.
Okay.
I wouldn't stand for you to make a correction of something I said. I have to do it myself. I want to make a correction here on the air. Last time when we were talking about how Dave attacked all the listeners of the show and said that they're... Oh, no, it wasn't Dave. Kenny attacked them as low IQ, and then... Well, no, Dave did too, actually.
No, Dave said... I think
Dave did too.
It was dumb, low IQ, something along those lines. He was even more detailed about the stupidity of our audience than his friend Twinkletoes was. Go ahead.
And I pointed out just a few instances, and I could have gone on for a while, where I think it's hypocritical coming from Dave, but I did point out that the year-end awards, Brian Alvarez's book won Book of the Year. That was the previous year. It's still a book I wouldn't necessarily call a Book of the Year, but it won the previous year. The book that, in fact, beat Andre the Giant's fantastic biography by Bertrand Hébert and Pat LaPrade, two well-respected historians doing great work. And, of course, the Buddy Rogers biography, amazingly researched by Tim Hornbaker, one of the most respected wrestling historians today. The book that beat them out was the book featuring the flaky musings of the soft boys known as the Young Bucks. It was their biography that beat out them. So again, with all due respect, don't talk about the IQ of the audience.
So for that audience, the Young Bucks book, but that's because it wasn't as heavy reading as Andre or Rogers. It just had, it was double spaced and was mostly
soft.
Pictures. And then they had the coloring section that took up some space. So, but I understand that is their cover is now a meme going around certain establishments in big cities of the two sexy looking guys looking at each other's tallywhackers. Anyway.
I will say one other thing too. We haven't talked about this off air. I was surprised by some of the people that got in touch with me to say they appreciated the segment on Dave Meltzer. I was surprised by that. It wasn't a reaction I was expecting, but apparently some of the things we said, maybe not as vociferously or violently as were said by you or maybe even me at times, but a lot of people really did appreciate the message, I think. The idea that he has been very dismissive and very condescending to a lot of people, and it comes down to you're rejecting what he anointed, and the reaction has been pretty amazing, actually.
So you were surprised at this I'm not surprised at that reaction. I figured that was kind of be that reaction. But if you're going to talk about somebody being condescending and dismissive, come to the expert here, pal. Anyway, I got a real quick email. Maybe you can help me out with this, or some of the listeners can. I'll read it first. It's from Tom in North Carolina. Hi, Jim and Brian. I was a fan of the Midnight Express since your first arrival in the NWA on WTBS. I grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia, so I usually had to travel to Roanoke to watch the matches. I watched both versions of the Express several times, but I was unfortunately not able to see them win a big match in person. We put a lot of the baby faces over at the house shows. The NWA returned for a couple of shows to Lynchburg in the late 80s after a long hiatus. One show featured the Midnight Express, then U.S. champions, against Ron Garvin and Barry Windham. I thought that for sure they would win because the belts would not change hands in an untelevised house show. I was disappointed to see that Windham scored a pin on a sunset flip to win in what turned out to be an unannounced non-title match. Most fans were happy, but not me. Here's where it gets good. I saw the Express the next year in, he says the 1988, but this was actually 1989. I excuse his mistype. In the 1989 Great American Bash in Roanoke, and rooted for them in a 2-ring battle royal for $25,000. This was the first time I'd seen the Express in person as fan favorites. This battle royal started with all the wrestlers in Ring 1. They were eliminated from Ring 1 when thrown over the top rope, then joining another battle royal in Ring 2. In the end, obviously, 2-ring battle royal, the winner of Ring 1 competed against the winner of Ring 2. This was a really cool match. To the best of my memory, Stan Lane was left in Ring 1, and Bobby Eaton won Ring 2. As they faced up to fight, you ran in, Jim, and proposed on the mic that you all just split the prize. They agreed, and I cheered loudly. It was a perfect result, and I went home happy that day. What do you remember about this match, Jim? Also, what do you remember about the finish? Do you know why I read this email, Brian?
No.
Because if you'd have held a gun to me, I didn't remember that taking place. I looked at the Midnight Express record book, and all it says is we beat, oh, God damn it. Now I don't even have the book in reach, but we were on the card. That was when we were the summer. We were baby faces, and we beat one of the heel teams in a tag match, but I didn't write it down. I don't remember that. I remember doing it with Bobby and Dennis, and I've mentioned this in the past. When we first started for Crockett, Dusty said the Midnight Express go over every night when he was starting our push. They're not putting anybody over, and that we even on a few spot shows, small town shows, they were the last two left in a single ring battle royal, and we split the money. But I don't remember doing this. And I didn't write it down, and nobody's ever mentioned it again to me to this day. And the only thing that I can think of is, well, the title of the Great American Bash 1989 chapter in the Midnight Express book was, What If They Gave a Bash and Nobody Came? Because remember, that's what TBS had taken over, 8 months before? The houses were horrible. I mean, abysmal. Some of them were jokes. And I don't know whether I was just like, oh, God, now we got to stay till the end of this thing before we can get out of here and get home. I don't know. But I had no memory of that and still can't fucking remember doing it. But I take his, testimony because it meant a lot to him, Tom, in North Carolina. Thank you, Tom.
How surprised are you that you didn't put it in your book?
Well, I'm surprised. I'm shocked even. Dumbfounded, gobsmacked, bumfuzzled. Mildly upset.
What else has Jim Cornette left out of Midnight Express history?
Well, they got to test it. If anybody else was there that night in Roanoke and can tell me what more of these details were, I'd like to hear them. The Great American Bash was not exactly a bash that year. It was more like a whimper. Here's something that everybody's going to go just ape shit about, and I'm not going to box myself into too many corners, but I've been talking to Hotchkiss Featherbottom, and we have a Labor Day weekend target now for the all-new JimCornette.com to debut, the new store, the new website, the new look, the end of my life, because I'll once again start filling merchandise orders and have no personal life whatsoever outside the parameters of this podcast that we do. But more news in the future in the next few weeks on the debut, the unveiling. And I'm going to dare some people to go to it and crash it this time. And I told Hotchkiss, I said, I'm going to dare, even if they don't want to buy something, when we announce when this website's going on the air, by God, I want everybody to go there and just look at it and try to crash it. You know what he said? I'll tell you what he said. He said, please don't do that. He's got a lot of confidence in his work, though. Are you there?
Yeah, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah. What do you mean? Hotchkiss has been on the ball here lately.
The ball.
And chain, which is attached to his ankle instead of that fancy monitor thing. They just went ahead and went back low tech because he kept trying to fucking pry the thing off, and the alarm kept going off, and it was bothering him, having to send somebody over there all the time with a fucking car, a squad car. So they went back low tech and just chained him to a fucking lead bowling ball. Anyway, I've got another email here from one of our low IQ listeners, one of the college graduates that does amazing research here. We've been talking about historical tidbits on the program over the last several weeks, here and there, from the St. Louis program books that Scott Teal's put out and some of my files and some of the other various research material that we have about attendance for wrestling back in the old days. We've been talking about the early 50s, 50, 51, 52, etc., and given some of the St. Louis and Chicago statistics. Well, Joseph from Virginia Beach took us up on our dare, because remember we were talking about not only the attendances, but also the pay for professional athletes back in those days. We determined that there were several wrestlers that were making as much, if not more money than the highest paid players in professional baseball. And the NFL was even farther behind with, you still had guys in the late 50s making less than 10 grand a year, just rank and file players. So anyway, this brings up an interesting juxtaposition of how the popularity of both of these sports, baseball and wrestling, have aged over the years. And, you get a lot of people, Brian, say, well, yeah, sure. A lot of people went to wrestling back in those days because there was nothing to do. You've heard that one, right? Absolutely nothing to do.
That's my favorite one. Of course, people went more often back then. There were less things to do.
Okay, well, one of those things to do was go to a baseball game, and the other one was go to wrestling, among the things that were there to do. So, Joseph says, Mr. Cornette, I chose to compare 1951 wrestling to 2019 wrestling, as well as to another popular sport, Major League Baseball. I've chosen the 16 teams that existed in 1951 and their modern equivalents. In 1951, the 16 Major League Baseball teams over a 154-game season back then, apparently, which is more than they play these days, right?
No, they play 162 now.
Okay, well, okay, but wait a minute. Well, then hold on, let me read this. In 1951, the 16 MLB teams over 154-game season sold 16.1 million tickets, with the top seller being the Yankees with 1.95 million, and the lowest being the St. Louis Browns, now Orioles, selling 294,000. Now, he says in 2019, over an 84-game season, these same teams sold 38.2 million tickets. So where is the difference there? You're messing up his research.
Well, Jim, one of the things, and I've talked to other people about this, that's a little different today about baseball that you have to take into the equation that you didn't really have back then. I've been to baseball games, like when the Mets were bad. I used to love to go to either Shea Stadium or Citi Field and just kind of have an empty stadium to hang out. And there'd be no one there. You could count how many people were there. Sometimes there was no more than 8,000 people in Shea Stadium. You'd see the newspaper the next day, 23,000 people. Same thing with, Citi Field. There are days that there's not many people there. You'd read in the newspaper, 23,000 people. I'm just using that number. It's not always the same. And you say to yourself, well, there aren't that many people there. They sold that many tickets, but they don't get that many people through the turnstiles because there are so many businesses and companies that have season tickets, that have groups of tickets that if no one's there to take them, if they don't give them to someone, if no one gets them as a gift, if no assistant takes them and takes someone to the game, no one goes. Those seats are empty, but the ticket is sold. So that is something you have to think about when you compare ticket sales then versus now. There are a lot of tickets sold now, although no one's actually sitting in the seats.
Well, nevertheless, is it 22 million tickets?
No, I don't think it's that many tickets.
Okay, what he's saying here, and we are free to engage other people in their research if they want to question this, but Joseph is saying in 1961, these 16 teams sold 16 million tickets, and the same teams in 2019 sold 38.2 million tickets. Now, he further says, as stated by us, quoting the Wall Street Journal article from 1951 that we were talking about, 12 million wrestling tickets were sold in 1951. According to Wikipedia, there were 27 territories in existence at that time, and give or take. And then there were also
what's a territory?
Single cities, and what was a territory there, etc. But the point is, there were a lot of wrestling events. And obviously, from what just the research material we've got, in 1951, you could take St. Louis, Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York and get close to 1 million. That leaves every place else in the entire United States. But anyway.
And that's a down New York.
And that was when New York was just starting back up after being dark. But anyway, so basically, in 1951, 8% of the U.S. population of 154 million people then bought a ticket to a wrestling event. Now, 8% of the population buying tickets to a wrestling event in 2019 would mean 26 million tickets would have been sold. If wrestling held up its ratio of the population there, and if wrestling held its ratio to baseball, in other words, the percent of tickets that wrestling sold compared to baseball, wrestling would have sold 28 million tickets. And he says, I can't add up the ticket sales of every company in the United States in 2019, but there is no possibility of it being enough to get to 26 or 28 million. To me, this indicates wrestling has lost ground in popularity as sport or entertainment. What say you? I say yes. That's the point. There were other things to do when they had bowling. There were other things to do when it's not like suddenly electricity just came around in 1985 and all of a sudden, oh, now there's plenty of things. There's always been shit to do, just different shit. But things that were around, especially sports that were around in those days, with the exception of roller derby, are all more popular than they were then and more lucrative than they were then. Only wrestling is not.
Live experiences are more lucrative now than ever before. Various forms of entertainment, anything that's about getting out of the house, going there, being involved. It's more lucrative now than ever before. Yet the WWE runs less shows than ever before. They can't get people to attend these shows to the point where they're profitable or that it's worth it, or profitable enough that it's worth it, I should say.
Well, and I mean, obviously the days of being able to run the same market weekly or bi-weekly or even monthly as in the old days are gone, because nobody is that emotionally invested in wrestling anymore, for one thing. And secondly, that would get, at today's prices, that would get expensive. In the, you know, when you do the inflation calculator math of ticket prices for even the hot territories in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that ran weekly or bi-weekly, it doesn't begin to come up to the prices of tickets today, because they're only in that market one time. They want to get people for as much money as possible, and you ain't going to see them again for a year or however long. The promoters in those days were going for repeat business, but the promoters in those days still made a whole lot more money going out on the road and selling tickets than anybody is today to a live event for wrestling. And like you just said, it's not like nobody goes to see anything anywhere anymore. So I don't know. I think they're just trying to make the explanation that they've got in their head, they're working backwards and trying to make it fit from there. No, wrestling's just a lot less popular overall than it ever has been, and especially less popular than it was in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even the 90s. You know why, Brian?
Why is that?
Because none of these people, nobody in wrestling and nobody watching wrestling, is getting a good night's sleep.
I can believe it.
You know, one of our new friends in our family of sponsors that people have been talking about specifically, they've been talking about the very first spot that we did for him the other day on the program.
Pacifically?
Pacifically and Atlantically as well. They are talking about the spot that we did the other day on the program for our fine friends at Beam and the Beam Dream Powder. Everybody started talking about that instantly. That's the only thing that was on the tips of their lips as soon as we told them about this. Because, folks, when it comes to recovery, performance, immunity, and feeling less stressed, sleep is everything. And now the answer has been found to better sleep in a delicious, healthy cup of cocoa. Cocoa, I say. It's the Dream CBD powder from Beam, the dream from Beam. And it's changed the way that people sleep. With Dream Powder, you're getting more than just quality shut-eye. You're providing your body with sleepy vitamins and minerals like magnesium, reishi, that theanine stuff, and nano CBD. Do not laugh at the way I pronounce theanine.
Did you say sleepy vitamins?
Sleepy vitamins. That's what they're called. Sleepy vitamins. It makes you sleep. And theanine. Dream is essentially a guilt-free, sleep-inducing warm cup of organic cacao and organic cinnamon. Cacao is a little different than cocoa because you have the A up front and the emphasis on the cacao. and organic cinnamon. There's no calories or added sugar, and there is proof in the powder. As we've mentioned, statistics show after taking Dream Powder, 99% of people feel an improvement in the quality of their sleep. 97% of the people felt more energized the next day, and 2% of the people were talked off a bridge. If you want better sleep no, I'm just kidding about the other percent. I won't do that anymore, I promise.
I'm kidding about the other percent.
That last percent was just added for entertainment value only. If you want better sleep and better days delivered every month, they will deliver these days to your door when you subscribe to Dream. For awesome perks like free delivery and 30 papa.
Cacao and papa.
I was what I'm trying. Cacao. Stop it. Awesome perks like free delivery and 35% off your first month of Dream. Plus, you can pause or cancel this at any time. You subscribe today, you'll save 35%. By doing this, do this now. Do not wait. Go to Beam, BEAMTLC.com/JCE. That's Beam, BEAM. Stop it. BEAMTLC.com/JCE. And if you use that code JCE at checkout, you get the free delivery, you get the 35% off. You'll have my undying gratitude. We want these people to spread this powder across America because everybody will sleep better. You'll wish you'd never wake up again when you sleep on this shit, folks. Sweet dreams, everybody.
You know, Jim, it's too bad he's not around. The perfect spokesman for Beam would be Mr. Scott from Star Trek.
Beam me up, Scotty.
That's right.
Well, you don't want to be up on Beam. You want to be down on Beam. You want to be asleep on Beam.
No. Beam me back up to the spaceship so I can take a nap.
We'll work on that one. Anyway, speaking of working on things, have you been working on your WWE talent roster, Brian?
What do you mean working on it?
Last week. Last week we picked the people that we would keep out of their entire roster. And now have you been, I've been working on mine. You've been working on yours?
No, I mean, the way I remember it is we went down together the list of the roster.
Yeah.
You picked the people that you would pick. I didn't agree or disagree most of the people you picked, but the people you didn't pick, I said the ones I would argue for, that I would potentially take on my roster. Oh, you're just
arguing for them. You're just advocating.
I might take them on my roster.
You're not sure about Danny Burch or Otis. You just might take them.
Well, I will definitely take Danny Burch. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm going to the grave for Danny Burch, but Danny Burch is on the list. He's on my team.
Well, do you have your list in front of you?
I don't have a list. No.
What? Well, you made a list.
I didn't make a list. You made a list.
I made a list of who I wanted. As a matter of fact, I made a list of who you wanted too, but I don't know why I should share it with you.
Can you fax it to me?
I'll put it in the mail and put a stamp on it and send it to you. But basically, what we did last week was we went to WWE.com and we went to their Superstars page, and there is a roster of literally, I think one of the fans wrote and said it was like over 200 individual talents of varying degrees of applicability for that word. And we went down and either said, yep, yay or nay on whether we would keep them for if we were booking this thing, what talent were we interested in? We're going to put our own roster together and see if we can separate some of the wheat from the chaff. I separated the wheat from the chaff. You additionally took some chaff that you said you would now apparently consider. But what I've done is I have taken the names that I chose and I've put them together in the form of a tentative roster because I've promised the people that I would continue on this thing. I see you didn't do your homework. But what I did was, and I'm giving some I'm going along with the fact that there's going to be a lot of people on this roster, more than there would in a traditional territory. So I kind of souped up Vern Gagne's Great 8 theory. You're familiar with the Vern Gagne Great 8 theory?
I think so, and actually that was going to be my question as we consider these rosters and any future rosters going forward. Should we have a maximum and a minimum of what we need to take?
Well, you've got to have a maximum, because then you'd have over 200 people, and which everybody get lost in the shuffle, which is what their problem is now. And acting like they're three different promotions when really everybody, it's the same fucking company. The only people left that think that Raw and SmackDown and NXT are really different is the people that are already watching, and they don't have enough of those. But Vern Gagne's Great 8 theory is, if I had these 8 guys, then I can run my territory, and it doesn't matter. I'll book other people in and out to work around them and with them. That's the theory. And generally, because remember, in the AWA, they only ran one town a night. They didn't run a full 7-night-a-week schedule. They ran more bigger buildings than any type of smaller shows. That's why guys made good money and had a lot of time off, but they also didn't keep many people in the territory. Even a big show in Denver or St. Paul or whatever was 5 matches, right? So with 8 guys that were key, integral guys, Vern had his 2 tag teams, babyface and heel tag team, and he had a champion and 3 guys in the mix as top singles, and then he could just work other guys around those. So you can't do that with the WWF these days because it is so big, but I extrapolated to a Great 8 of singles talent, and then the next 8 that would be bubbling up that you would, in theory, want at least 2 or maybe 3 of your next 8 to eventually replace 2 people in your Great 8. And then I put together 6 tag teams so we could have a goddamn tag team division that we obviously would focus on the world tag team champions in just almost as major a capacity as the world heavyweight champion, because tag teams draw. There's just none out there anymore. So with that thought, would you like to hear my list?
I would.
And some reasoning.
Yes.
I will first mention that there are 4 names on my keep list off the WWE roster that I did not put on my roster in the Great 8, the next 8, or whatever, and I'll tell you why. Because 3 of them would be used as attractions only, like the big star that used to come in for the major event, or the Andre traveling around the world and you'd only see him intermittently. The 3 attractions would be Edge, Rey Mysterio, and John Cena. Because Cena's, at this point, he's willing to come back, so he qualifies. But these are guys, if you see them as one of the boys, as a regular member of the roster, then it takes the edge off of them, no pun intended. In Mysterio's case, overexposure breeds familiarity, he becomes one of the boys. Edge has this comeback thing going for him, even though some of his return has been booked a little strangely. He's got name value, but you don't want to beat his body up and have him work full time. He's a guy that's more valuable to me on 3 or 4 big shows and the TVs leading up to him, rather than being around all the time. And obviously Cena, you want him to draw for the big shows, but you don't want him around all the time because he overshadows the rest of the talent, because he's still over. But it's like Eddie Graham used to say when he would call Vince Sr. and say, "Can you book Dusty for a few weeks? I got to get somebody out of Florida so I can get somebody else over." And one more name, Brock Lesnar. He's not on my roster because I don't care if we're fucking fantasy booking or coming up with this shit out of our ass or not. He's not going to work more than twice a year, right? So Brock Lesnar, instead of an attraction, because of his connection with Paul Heyman, becomes a spoiler/policeman for Heyman's other charge, Roman Reigns, until you want to pull the trigger and have Reigns and Brock. And where does Heyman go? So the point, do people even know what a policeman is anymore?
Xia Li.
Well, no, Jesus Christ. And she got fucking blistered the other way. We're going to talk about NXT, too, here coming up. But there was a receipt given out to Xia Li, the knockout artist. But anyway, Brock would become a policeman where Reigns is being protected by Heyman and by Brock, who comes in only when somebody that comes along that Heyman thinks can beat Reigns. Well, then to get a match, you got to go through Brock, right? And then finally, after a year and a half, Brock gets a little fucking jealous of this, even if he is making millions of dollars per match, and decides to tell Heyman to fucking pick a side, pal. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So those 4 guys are attractions. They're not on the main roster. Here's my grade 8 as far as the singles roster goes. Walter, since he would be the champion. Walter would be the champion so that Reigns could come in, and finally, when it was time, Reigns and Heyman could defeat Walter so that Brock could then be da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Walter's in the top mix. What? Go ahead.
Who's the babyface?
That's the beauty of Walter. He is a champion. You don't need a babyface and you don't need a heel. That's why on my grade 8, there are 1, 2, 3. There are 4 babyfaces, 3 heels, and Walter. Because he has no allegiance. Instead of a tweener, he's the old-fashioned world champion. He has no allegiance to anybody and he don't give a fuck. Right? And he is a guy that makes that work. Everybody else has a clearly defined role so that it stands out. Your baby faces are Randy Orton, because he can still go, he's still in shape, he's already over, and you're going to want him to fucking make at least one of the guys on your next 8 list. So the baby faces, Randy Orton, Damian Priest, Samoa Joe, and Bronson Reed. Samoa Joe works with Walter. Samoa Joe works with Brock. Samoa Joe works with Reigns. Also, your heels, Lashley, Reigns, and Karrion Kross with Scarlett. Samoa Joe works with fucking Kross. Samoa Joe works with that type of your heavyweights. Your singles title is going to be your big guys, and with a heavily MMA influence style, except for your guys like, this is why Damian Priest, he has an MMA kind of thing going for him, but at least he's a star and he's a personality. You want him in that mix. And Bronson Reed, because even though they keep trying to beat over your head that he's been in the business 14 years, he looks young and he can do some shit if they just find him a personality. So anyway, Walter, Orton, Lashley, Reigns, Reed, Priest, Joe, and Kross. And you got Scarlett in Kross's corner, Heyman in Reigns' corner, MVP in Lashley's corner. What do you think about them apples?
It's interesting. And I just want to clarify for the listeners, based on the grade 8, these aren't the only wrestlers. These are just the main 8 people that everything rotates around.
Yes. No, I'm fixed to tell you the next day.
You're going to tell me the tag teams, too.
I'm gonna do that here in a minute.
Well, I want to hear the next 8 before I talk about this 8.
That's how I was gonna do it.
Yeah.
Because, well, tell me, since that's the grade 8, tell me any of the next 8 that need to be on that list instead of the next 8 bubbling underneath with the thought to elevate a couple of these younger guys. AJ Styles, because what a worker he is. And by the way, these are the heels. AJ Styles, Seth Rollins, because he looks good, he's exciting. We'll try to get him a voice coach for that whiny voice and not make him the boring Monday Night Messiah. LA Knight, because he's new, he's different, he can work, he can do pro wrestling. Bumping around, he can run his fucking mouth and he looks like something. And did I mention he's at least new? And Austin Theory, who is a prodigy, and he is the guy that eventually you would want Randy Orton to elevate, because they could fucking tear the house down, because Theory can do shit beyond his years, and Orton could teach him how to do it right and think about it right. And your baby faces on the next 8 or Cesaro, because people like him and he ought to get a chance. Drew McIntyre, because I liked him more before they started using him than I do now. Dominic Dijakovic, who is, what is he? T-bar, rebar?
Or is he Mace? There's a Mace and there's a T-bar, but there's also a T-bone.
T-bone, T-bar, whatever. Dominic Dijakovic is in there because he's young and he's big, but he can move, and he had some talent before he disappeared. And the fourth one is a surprise. He was not on our list because he was not on the roster. He's a guy that I saw on NXT this past Tuesday night completely by accident, and he would be one of the guys in the next 8 that I would eventually be elevating to the grade 8 if he's not a complete mental case, because everything I saw was fantastic. Odyssey Jones.
I don't even know who that is.
They found a new Keith Lee, and he looks 10 years younger, 30 pounds bigger, talks more friendly, has a great smile, and he can work his ass off from what I saw. And he's in they're doing the tournament for the, oh, God damn it, what do they call it? The Breakout Stars, Future Star, whatever. This guy could be JYD level over in New Orleans if you fucking pushed him as a massive babyface. I can see it. I fell in love instantly with Odyssey Jones. Anyway.
What were the baby faces on your, other than Odyssey Jones, who was on your second 8?
Dijakovic, Cesaro, and Drew McIntyre.
See, I'm not crazy about McIntyre right now either, but I also think you have Bronson Reed. Bronson Reed shouldn't be on the top 8 in my eyes. I would put him
I think we can do something with him.
I'm not saying you couldn't, but I don't know about right now.
We could switch those.
And Orton as a babyface instead of a heel. And Orton's one of those guys I go back and forth on. I appreciate everything he does, but there aren't a lot of his matches that I love. But I appreciate what he does. So I know he's really good at what he does, but is he better at doing that as a heel than as a babyface?
But see, it's not going to be about Randy, because Randy's been there 20 years too. He's the last one from the golden era that's still there reasonably full time. So your task over the next year or two is to transition Randy Orton to more of a beloved icon status and let him slip 1 or even 2 in a couple of years of these younger guys over after lengthy programs to give them some experience, which is why Orton is on the top list for the next 2 years to be moved to the secondary list or retire or whatever he wants to do.
Hey, let me just real quick say something, because I looked it up because I don't know anything about Odyssey Jones. His real name is Omari Palmer. He's a former Syracuse...
Is Harry Palmer? Is that what you said?
Omari Palmer.
Oh.
A former Syracuse offensive lineman, and they changed his name. I mean, that's one of the things, too. It seems like they're getting guys who are athletes in college and sometimes even professionally, and they're changing those names.
Well,
names that
I got news for you. I like Odyssey Jones a whole lot better than Harry Palmer.
Well, you may have a point with this one.
All right. Anyway, and the three singles that I couldn't find a place for, John Morrison, Cameron Grimes, and Dexter Lumis, not because I didn't want to use them, but because they were odd men out, and you need a fairly even number of heels and baby faces. Vince used to get hot when the babyface list was too short on the left and the heel list was too long on the right. He's like, what are we doing here? We're off kilter. But a lot of people are saying, well, I don't see some names or hear some names. That's because the tag team roster is going to be completely revamped and revitalized for the most part. I got 6 tag teams, 3 heel teams and 3 babyface teams. And the idea is that the tag team title will be presented as comparable to the world title, of which there would be only one, obviously. And the tag team division would be the division where everybody can work and tear the house down. I'm not talking about gymnastics or Cirque du Soleil. I'm talking about fucking blistering pro wrestling matches that'll bring the people out of their fucking seats. You want to hear these 3 teams?
I'm very interested, yeah.
Okay, you're going to like one of them. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn.
Well, that's not one of them, I'm assuming.
We're gonna bring it into the long-running rivalry. We're gonna team these two fucking mushroom heads up because the one thing that they love each other and they love to wrestle each other, but also they love to have creative matches. So let them ply their trade with a reasonable producer in the tag team division. Bobby Fish and Roderick Strong, because they could work with anybody.
Okay, so obviously not Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, the long-standing team Red Dragon.
No. Hold on, more later. Shelton Benjamin and Chad Gable, the shooter team, and not only I know what Shelton can do, and Gable was having those matches with FTR with his partner that got hurt. So same thing, he has a tag team aptitude. Ziggler and Rude, they're already a team. They look like $1 million, and they just send them out there to do falderall. And the top babyface tag team, Finn Balor and Tommaso Ciampa. Can you see what those two could do together as an odd couple-ish tag team, but one that actually wanted to team up with each other? They're just different personalities. And the top heel tag team, Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly. And they get the massive push, and they are almost unbeatable. They are the Bockwinkel and Stevens of the modern era.
I think due to Kyle O'Reilly's size, that may be the best way to use him on the main roster as in a tag team.
And they do to both. Because look at Adam Cole, looks like a rock star. He's
and
got
Adam Cole. Excuse me, I meant to say
yeah.
Adam Cole. I said Kyle O'Reilly. I meant to say Adam
both.
Cole. Yeah.
That's the thing. Cole looks like a rock star. Cole can talk his ass off. He's got that fucking oomph, and he can work traditional pro style like crazy. And O'Reilly's got the different style, but they know each other well. They actually were a babyface team 10 years ago in Ring of Honor. But now that they've both grown up, between the two of them, the way they mesh, and also then you immediately establish Cole and O'Reilly as not only the tag team specialists of the modern era, and nobody can beat them together. And to prove that, you put a couple of the baby faces in your top singles ranks together as a team and let Cole and O'Reilly beat them. And they got to be much bigger than Cole O'Reilly too, because that way you prove that the smaller guys together working in concert can beat a bigger guy. And the tag team specialists in tag team matches can even beat the top singles guys, just the way it used to be.
I do like the idea of Cole and O'Reilly versus, what did you say, Balor and Ciampa?
Balor and Ciampa.
That'd be good.
And then you have
because no one's really much bigger than anyone else, so they'd all look around the same size. They're all fast-moving. That could be a good modern match.
And then you have all of those tag teams basically protected as far as not beating them in singles with your singles crew. And of course, there's a number 3 babyface team and a number 2 babyface team and number 1 and etc. for the heels, but it can go in any direction depending on the issue. But you've got 6 teams there that can tear the fucking house down in the ring, and that's what the tag team's job would be. And people are saying, well, who are all these people going to beat? Well, you got 16 singles and 6 tag teams out of 250 motherfuckers. So the answer is they're going to beat everybody else. And since you misogynistic, sexist pig, Brian Last, said you wanted to be different and not have a women's division, well, I do, by cracky. I do want a women's division. And I actually picked out 7 women without even keeping track. So all I needed is 1 more. So I took Bianca Belair off your list. You want to hear my women?
I don't know.
What? Why do you sound like
I'm afraid. I don't know what you're going to say.
I'm going to say Vanessa Del Rio and Betty Page and goddamn, Carmen Miranda here.
We're crossing generations. Now you're just being ridiculous. But
well, of course, as far as the completely serious conversation that we're having about fantasy booking.
That's right. Well, you are starting in the right way. You're calling them women as opposed to girls. So that's good.
Okay, so here's my list of girls. So, the heels. We have Raquel Gonzalez. We have Shayna Baszler. we have Frankie Monet, and we have Charlotte Flair. And with Charlotte Flair, you know who I didn't put on this list of wrestlers, but she's probably one of the best female talents? Bayley. Bayley's out 9 months with an ACL. Bayley's hurt, but Bayley cuts one of the best promos of any of the women. Why could you not dress, instead of making an idiot out of her like they did at WrestleMania when she was dressed up in like a reporter's outfit and trying to move in on everything and everybody was blowing her off, dress her up in the business suit type thing that she was wearing and make her Charlotte's J.J. Dillon. She can talk, she can be at ringside, she can advise, she can interrupt, obstruct, whatever the case. And that way, because I think they're crazy if Bayley ain't gonna fucking be wrestling when she's 50, I would imagine. But the way she can talk, they're crazy if they don't start her out as some way to represent or interact with some of the girls that can't talk so that she can do it for them. You want to hear my baby faces?
I will say I like that idea of Charlotte with Bayley, at least for the next 9 months.
Well, there you go. And then who knows what might happen.
You did need Dakota Kai on that list of heels in the top 8.
Well, she ain't there. She's over here on this list. Wait a minute. Federal Witness Protection Program. Right there. Okay. My baby faces, Bianca Belair, Toni Storm, because she's new and she looks like a star, Becky Lynch, because she's over and they chant for her, and Rhea Ripley. And you then just bring other girls in and feed them to these girls and keep these girls over as your grade 8, as your standard bearers, and everybody else is immaterial at this point. And then sooner or later, somebody will come along and replace one of those, et cetera, and so goes the way of the world. What do you think?
Well, again, you're hitting me with all this. It's not like I have it in front of me where I could look at it and...
Yeah, not like you actually worked on this like I did.
No, I could if you really wanted me to, but I haven't. I think I agree with some of your stuff, and I understand the reasoning for others, but some of those guys, in my eyes, there are certain guys that if it was me and I was taking over, I would want off my TV for at least a while. Bobby Roode and Dolph Ziggler. For me, I would want them off my... Dolph Ziggler I would want off my TV for a while. Very talented guy. Has been used horribly for so long. I don't know how much value he actually adds to what I'm trying to do. Bobby Roode...
I can see that. I can see that because of... But I thought we were mostly erasing everything that had been done and trying to move ahead.
Is that... Well, hold on. Now, this is interesting. Is your booking reign here... and I guess mine in the fantasy universe where I actually do the roster, are our booking reigns taking place in a universe where there's nothing happening, we're picking up from scratch, or we're picking up from what's happening now?
Well, in most part, I'm just looking at the talent that I would want and that I would use if I was running a company, and I would have to say that if we considered previous WWE booking, I wouldn't want any of these guys. So I think we can leave out the previous booking and just this talent. If you could mold them and shape them in a positive direction, where would you put them? What would you do? That's what we got to go with.
Even with that, it's hard for me to imagine someone like Ziggler, who, again, very talented, but he's been there for such a long time in various roles. I mean, he was the world champion at one point.
Okay, then I'm gonna pull a Jim Barnett and I'm gonna fucking go open up Australia.
Okay.
They're all brand new.
You're going to pull a Jim Barnett and open up Australia? What are you running from, Jim Cornette?
The University of Kentucky football team. All right, we'll deal with this more at a later date. Maybe we'll see what the you know what that would be, kid. Do they even list the roster on AEW's website, or are they embarrassed?
They do list the roster. I mean, I think they do. We could double check, but
that might be something to do. Next week we'll go through that roster and we'll pick and choose, and then we'll see. We'll do the same thing with them, and we'll see the grade 8, the next 8, and the 6 tag teams and the 8 women, and see an intra-promotional rivalry, how close it would be.
I like it. Sounds like a good idea. Of course, you can call your roster to Thin 30.
The Thin 30. Hey, that was the football coach. That had nothing to do with Barnett. He was feeding him as much meat as he possibly could. Anyway, did you watch NXT this week?
I did not. I did not know I was expected to, or I would have.
Well, see, no, it's not like I just have to give out homework assignments. A little bird told me that they had a great match on, or a match that I would consider great on there. And as a result, I had to see it. And what I did was I zipped through the rest of the show to just find the points of interest past that match. Would you like to hear a few things?
I would. And the one thing I'm curious about, because I did see some things on Wednesday, which made me think, are they on Wednesday? But I guess it was just a taping or something. Do they have fans there more than there were the last time you watched?
No, they still got well, God damn it. Now I'm trying to think. It's in the smaller place, so they have fans, but did they also have the screens? I don't know. I try to tune all that shit out. I'm actually, whenever I watch anything now, I try to tune out at least the WWE, the crowd or the screens or whatever, and focus on what's going on because the other shit's so distracting. I can't remember whether they had more fans than the last time I watched it or not. It doesn't matter to me. Thank you for asking that question, though.
You're welcome. Thank you for telling me why you couldn't answer it. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, it started out with Samoa Joe. So how can we go wrong? Samoa Joe at the top of the program was pissed because Karrion Kross choked him out last week. And there's William Regal telling Joe that he can't be calling out the superstars because Joe said, I want Kross tonight. But Joe was fired up. He had some emotion. You believe that fucking chunky motherfucker when he's goddamn pissed off. Regal said, well, Kross is on his way. He said that. You've got to solve this peacefully. And Joe gets the final word in. Hey, tonight somebody's going to sleep, right? Dramatic foreshadowing. But this was at the top of the program. They were in and out in 5 minutes. And it teased, and you didn't get bored with it. It teased what the fuck's going to happen when Kross gets there. The Samoan has gone crazy. And they got in and got out. Unfortunately, and that's why Samoa Joe is believable, and he can do that shit, and he's believable against all their big guys, whether they're MMA fighters or shoot fighters or fucking, workers or whatever. But then they followed that Samoa Joe promo. The opening tag match was, I don't know what Roderick Strong and or Bobby Fish have done to deserve this. Kushida and Bobby Fish versus Roderick Strong and Tyler Rust. They've not only broken up the Undisputed Era, but now they're opposite against each other in preliminary matches with preliminary fucking partners. Roderick Strong has a crew cut. I don't know what, and this went 20 minutes. Followed by Cameron Grimes being LA Knight's butler. And they pulled up in the car, and he's got to carry the bags, and Drake Maverick offers to help him, but LA Knight won't let him. It's Cameron Grimes has something that's entertaining enough. When he does comedy, it's silly. When he just is himself and doing wrestling, he's funny. But when he's trying to be funny, it just gets silly. And LA Knight's just gotten there, and already he's interacting with this foolishness, and he's wrestling Drake Maverick on the show, 75 pounds lighter and a foot shorter. And these guys are doing the Three Stooges. Odyssey Jones then spoke, sit down, about his match coming up later on and how he wants to be the breakout star. Remember how I said, well, Keith Lee, he's this giant guy, used to play pro football. He does these power slams and splashes and incredible moves, but he talks like a goddamn math professor, and he doesn't either get mad or he's not necessarily, he seemed like an aloof personality, right? Here's Odyssey Jones. He used to play pro football. He can do these power slams. He can do these big fucking moves. He's got a smile to him. He talks like a real person. He sounded pleasant, but not to cross him, right? You could do something with this guy, and I would have to think he's significantly younger than Keith Lee. I don't know his age, but I would assume that. More on Odyssey later. Frankie Monet versus JC Jane. And Frankie Monet had Jessie Kamehameha in her corner. I think she's a stooge because Frankie Monet is a TV star or whatever. And I like Frankie Monet, but this was not the thing to do. She's so new in the company. JC Jane is greener than a pepper tree, and Frankie Monet tried to do a lot for her, and it drug this down because she wasn't ready to have all that done for her, and it took this off of several steps. And Robert Stone was lurking around. Oh, God, I hope we don't do that. But Frankie Monet hit her finish. Boom, 1, 2, 3.
Odyssey Jones is 27 years old.
There you go. So 10 years younger than Keith Lee. If the whole Keith Lee mystery has been that he's been being a problem child, then he no longer has a lot of leverage because they've just found a 10-year younger Keith Lee with a nice smile. Anyway, Wade Barrett did a sit down with Bronson Reed, and I love Bronson Reed because of his in-ring work and the way that he looks, but this was rotten because the stuff was written for both of them, and you could tell. They didn't have a conversation with each other. They recited lines to each other, not one stumble, not one stutter. He couldn't sell this. It wasn't real. It was memorized shit. But anyway, then the match that I came to the program to see, Kyle O'Reilly versus Austin Theory. Once I heard about that, I said, I got to see this fucking match, so I'll watch this show. And again, Austin Theory, I know he's still hooked up with, I think, the same face family, Johnny and his wife Candace. But this guy, he's got the attitude, facials, body language. He can work. He does the little things. He moves in the ring like he's a much more of a veteran than he is. It's amazing for his age. And both these guys, they kept up a fast pace and they did a lot of action, but it wasn't a style clash. They worked well together. And Kyle's style is unorthodox, but he knows how to blend it with people, and Theory he's just there. You would see this young guy in the spot where Paul Orndorff when he was a rookie in Mid-South, or a young guy that was a really great worker that you'd never heard of, and you'd first see him on Georgia TV, and you'd go, ooh, and then later on it would be a big star, whatever the fuck. I mean, it wasn't silly shit that they were doing. They never lost sight of they were having a contest, but because Theory has such a heel attitude and facials and everything, there was a little pro wrestling gaga in there, but not that took you out of it being a match, or that they were cooperating with each other, or that they're doing ridiculous shit, but they still did modern stuff. Theory has a thing where he's on the apron, he dives, does a forward roll through the ropes, comes up to his feet, leaps up, and gives a high drop kick. And it looks like he brings more momentum because of that. Well, this time he went for the roll and the leap up, and in midair, O'Reilly caught his leg and dropped him in a knee bar. Just cool shit. I'll tell you, Austin Theory is a guy that Paul Heyman would have snagged in ECW before he did too many jobs in some big national TV company and promote him as the best in-ring performer in the business. Like, well, that was Just Incredible's thing, right? Heyman, if Heyman was still running a promotion, this is a guy that he would have. And he could pay him dirt because he's getting him over.
Well, didn't he bring him up to the main roster for a short period of time, and then that was when Vince got rid of Heyman and Austin Theory went back down? Or am I wrong remembering that? I
wasn't watching then. But the Theory, he hit a whirly bird slam deal thing, got a close 2 count, hit a fisherman buster on his knee and got a close 2 count, and then flipped his wig and, went for the stairs. Like he was going to do something with the stairs. This is where they get into the sports entertainment gaga. Then the announcers had to say, oh my God, but Adam Cole did such and such to Kyle O'Reilly on the stairs. And that's when O'Reilly saw Austin Theory moving the stairs around and flipped out and just beat the shit out of him. So, okay. But anyway, he beats the shit out of Theory, hits a knee drop off the top rope onto the leg, and then grabs a leg lock, and Theory tapped out. It was a great match. It made Theory look better than, when they had him interacting with midgets and comedy personnel. He tapped out. He's a heel. No worries, but he's moving up. So this actually was a nice piece of business, did what it was supposed to do. And obviously O'Reilly got over. And then I swear to God, they followed it with the Lucha suits. Remember that group? They're still wearing suits. They've got a nice logo, and they were in the ring with a mariachi band. After this wonderful, modern, athletic contest between two fucking fighters, they have the Lucha suits in the ring with a mariachi band. But the head guy in the Lucha suits kicked the band out because the fans didn't deserve to be entertained. And then the rappers came out. Hit Row, Death Row, Murder Row, whatever, AJ from Treasures, and the girl, and I think Swerve, and another guy. They're a rap record thing group. They came out and rapped.
Record thing group?
Whatever. They came out and rapped at the Lucha suits after the mariachi band got kicked out, and then they all got in a fucking fight, and I was speed searching. Joe was still waiting for Karrion Kross, and Regal was still trying to calm him down. The next match was Andre Chase in a NXT breakout match against Odyssey Jones. And Andre Chase, by the way, used to be Harlem Bravado, but he's cut his hair now. And this was a big man, little man match. And honestly, if they've seen Odyssey Jones before, I wouldn't have done this match. I wouldn't have done this match. I would have had this match, and Odyssey Jones would have gone over convincingly in about 2 or 3 minutes. I like the former Bravado brother as a person, and I'm not saying he should never be allowed to win a match on TV, but this, and he didn't win here, but he shouldn't have been competitive here. They got something with Odyssey Jones. But again, like the girls' match, because Odyssey Jones was so much bigger and so much stronger, they were having to do the contrived stuff where the little guy could somehow get the advantage for a minute. He was doing too much for Andre, and it was obvious that he was doing that for him rather than Andre was taking it, if that makes sense. So it shouldn't have been this complicated. At one point, Andre does the crossbody over the top, and Odyssey's supposed to catch him, but Andre came head first going downwards. He wasn't vertical, he was horizontal or whatever. And Odyssey was strong enough to catch him and cushion it enough to where he did not land on his neck or on his head and break his neck. And then Odyssey just muscled him right back up and picked him up, and they went for the spot they were going to do. But anyway, finally he hit his finish and made a comeback, hit his finish, 1, 2, 3. He's green, but this is what Keith Lee should have been. Fire, emotion, and some likability. So he may have lost his leverage, Mr. Lee. A new Hulk is in town. Next up was, as I mentioned, LA Knight with his butler Grimes against Drake Maverick. And I've said this, I've met the kid when he was Rockstar Spud. Drake Maverick, wonderful kid. He can work, and he's in great physical shape. He's like if Dwarf Dongsucker was a real athlete and a respectable person instead of, trailer park trash that he is. But he's still 5'2" and 140 pounds, and this is LA Knight, and he's brand new on the television. He looks fantastic physically. His work is crisp. It's sharp. He can talk. And he's wrestling competitively against a physically fit 12-year-old. So I skipped that. The women's title was on the line. Raquel Gonzalez, the new champion. Xia Li. Remember when Xia Li who was it? Mercedes Martinez knocked her out colder than a get-well card from an Undertaker, right?
Like 2 weeks ago, yeah.
Okay, well, revenge has been gotten. So Raquel is a foot taller and 50 pounds heavier than Xia Li. And I'm not watching because I don't care, but Gonzalez goes and does an upside-down Vader bomb. You know the Vader bomb. He'd get up on the ropes, kick his feet out, and splash the individual.
Right.
Vader bomb. Imagine if he did that, but when he kicked his feet out, if he also spun and turned face up and landed with his back on the individual he was splashing. Can you see that now?
I understand what you're saying. It's hard to see Vader doing that, but yes.
Well, now, he wouldn't have done it, but you can see what I'm saying. Well, that's what Raquel Gonzalez did, and when she turned upside down and was headed downwards, she couldn't see where she was going, and she landed completely with every bit of her weight on Xia Li. The ring didn't even make a noise when she landed. You could actually hear on the television audio the sound of air and life leaving Xia Li's body. And you knew she was fucked right off. And there was a cover, 1-2, and poor thing, she kicked out weakly. And then the referee went right in to check and then backed Gonzalez up. And then here come the doctors in to check, and she's laying there. And the referee's holding Raquel Gonzalez back, and the announcer, they replay the impact. Boom, boom, boom. And the doctors are checking on her. And Raquel said, "Get up, make her get up." And the referee's standing there looking. How was this not a stoppage? The fighter cannot continue. It wasn't the finish they had called, so this poor girl got squashed, and they didn't immediately just say, "No, fuck it, call it off." But here's why this was really stupid. Because finally, and that they were down for 2 or 3 minutes, and you know they had to be going, "Oh shit, the clock is ticking and we've got an angle," right? Finally, the doctors get out of the ring and Xia Li gets to her feet, and they say that she can continue after it's been stopped down for a couple minutes. She walks right toward Raquel Gonzalez. Raquel Gonzalez grabs her around the neck, picks her up, and gives her a giant choke slam flat of her back to further exacerbate the internal injuries that she may very well have, and then pins her 1, 2, 3. So, Brian, what would the difference have been between Xia Li getting fucking squashed and the referee just stopping it because she's really legitimately hurt, or them stopping the match for 2 minutes but not declaring anybody a winner and then letting this girl get back up so she can take a huge choke slam on that ring? It's harder than Chinese arithmetic, and then get pinned. Raquel Gonzalez was going to win anyway. What the fuck did they do there? How smart was that?
I don't know. And actually, as we're talking, I'm pulling up the clip so I could see. She's going up to the rope. There's the Vader. Oh, right on her. Oh, as soon as she turned over, you knew there was a problem. Man.
As soon as Raquel Gonzalez turned over, Xia Li should have known there was a problem. Anyway, so then the only thing left, and I was already writing during this match, where's Karrion Kross? Samoa Joe comes to the ring, spitting fire and vinegar, and calls Karrion Kross out. "Come out here. We're going to do this." Emotion, anger, threats even. It's wrestling again suddenly. And then guess what happened? That's where you guess what happened.
I don't have a guess. I have no idea in this stupid show. What happened?
Karrion Kross showed up on the screen. He's got the NXT championship belt with him. And as the camera pulls out, Karrion Kross is in the parking lot standing over William Regal. He's the one that got put to sleep.
Oh.
And Kross gets in his car and drives off. Right as and Joe is run from the ring by the time that Joe gets there, Kross, the car is speeding away, and that's the last. So they actually had a wrestling angle going. And I was hooked, and I was into it until the end of the show, and then like a sucker, they swerved back with the kidnapping and the sports entertainment and killed the whole goddamn thing.
And the funny thing, too, is he got in his car and he rode off to go to Raw and get squashed.
Yeah. They could have had Kross come stalking down that fucking aisle and had 30 people try to separate those motherfuckers and let them get just enough licks in on each other before that Sea of Humanity and would go off the air, and people would have been dying to see them fight.
Oh, with his facial expressions, can you just see a bunch of guys around him trying to hold him back while he's screaming and just emoting?
I've seen that before for a shoot. If you're talking about Samoa Joe.
I was talking about Cross.
Well, I'm talking about Joe. I've seen
Where'd you see that happen for a shoot?
Well, most notably when he was going to stretch the fuck out of Teddy Hart in New Jersey that time at the Ring of Honor show, when Teddy vomited in the fucking ring and Joe had to go on later. But no, they could have had the people, I want to see that fucking match worse than I want to see fucking penicillin when I got the goddamn crotch rot. And instead, they told somebody else got kidnapped in the parking lot, and we forgot this is all phony in the end, and killed it. So there you go. My thoughts on NXT.
Was it the late 90s where a wrestling arena became the most dangerous place to be backstage or even outside of? When did it become the most dangerous place? I mean, the Freebirds messed with Austin Idol's car, but that was away from the arena. That wasn't actually at the arena.
No, when it became the most dangerous place to be, when all the marks that had been watching territory booking from Dusty or Eddie Graham or Jerry Jarrett or anybody, and the only thing that they didn't retain was that those things that they remember so well were done once every year or two, not twice a week. That's when the marks that grew up watching that became in charge. They didn't retain that basic piece of information, and then it became chaos. And then the comedy writers that have never seen wrestling before they get signed to the WWE, they assume that that's the way it's always been because they've never seen this shit before. They watch 3 shows and 16 people get kidnapped and 15 of them get jumped in the fucking parking lot or in the backstage area. And okay, this is what we do here, because they don't know. That's what happened. It's the same thing. I mean, it's been going on for 20-something years since Shitstain. If Jimmy Snuka and Roddy Piper had both been in the territory when Shitstain was booking, Piper would have hit him with the coconut every fucking week for 6 months.
Week 1, coconut. Week 2, chainsaw. Week 3, death. Week 4, resurrection.
That's all that guys like that remember is the hitting over the head with the coconut, not why or how, or that the show had been going on for 6 months before that happened, or that the matches went for 6 months after that took place, or whatever the case. Anyway. All right.
Yes?
Before we get to the various all-petite wrestling news, what are you doing on the 605 these days?
Another action-packed week on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. Get information about all shows on Twitter at Superpodcast or on Facebook, facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard. Hold on, let's get this out of the way. This fucking chair.
Chair squeaking.
This week on Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam, another great week with Ricardo Coleman in the co-host chair as the boys look at Paul Orndorff, specifically looking at his time in Mid-South Wrestling. Check that out today at McAdamPod.com or look for Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
I didn't know John knew Ricardo Montalban.
Not Ricardo Montalban, Professor Ricardo Coleman, a Mid-South Wrestling expert.
Oh, he's the one that had that car with the rich Corinthian leather.
He's the one who did one of the best segments I've ever done in my life on 605, where we talked about the Junkyard Dog and the reaction of the people in the projects to the Junkyard Dog in New Orleans. And he revealed the fact that the people in the projects knew in 83 that the dog was fucking around with drugs. They all knew. The word spread. And it changed the way a lot of people saw the dog.
They looked out the window and saw a dog in that neighborhood.
And Randy Anderson. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But Ricardo Coleman and John, check that out. Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam. Also want to make mention of the latest episode of Charting the Territories with Al Getz and John Boucher, 2 wrestling historians talking wrestling history. Of course, Al does amazing wrestling research. And one of the things they do on this latest episode is look at and review the Bob Roop novel Deathmatch. Bob Roop taking moments from his career and putting them in novel form, changing names, and in some cases, completely changing stories or making up stories. Find out for yourself at chartingthepodcast.com or look for charting the territories wherever you find your favorite podcast. A lot of people have been talking about this show lately. And of course, the 605 Superpodcast, The Mothership. That was my best one in months. Things are cooking. Stay tuned. That's all I'm going to say.
Cooking.
That's all I'm going to say. It's a little bit of a tease. 605pod.com. Go through the archive today. The Mothership. And Jim, I have to say, I felt like I stopped you. Maybe I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong. I felt like maybe you wanted to jump in when I brought up the Bob Roop novel.
Well, he takes moments out of his career to figure out some way or another to slander and or revile the people in the wrestling business that he wants to get even with, whether he's stealing the territory, changing the stories, or whatever. Bob was trying to get even every way he could at that point.
I believe so. There's a whole chapter about Von Buller, the promoter.
Von Buller?
No, that's not that name. There is a Ron Fuller character with a made-up name and a twisted narrative, but it's not Von Buller. I will say that.
Morning, boys. Morning, Bob. Old Droopy Roop. Well, now, Brian, the rumors are running rampant. I love that alliteration. Rumors are running rampant on all the big names that are apparently in the process of going to join the Lollipop Guild over at our friends at AEW. And the first one that's been mentioned is the one I actually believe the most, and we've talked about this, Brian Danielson. When did we talk about this? Was a month or 6 weeks ago. We were mulling over who another surprise they were announcing could be.
Oh, no, it was a lot sooner than that. It was maybe 2-3 weeks ago.
Well, we do so many of these shows. Time passes by so quickly. He makes sense. He loves to wrestle. He loves the act of wrestling in the ring. He wants to work with guys that he hadn't worked with before or in a long time. He's got a second lease on his career. The WWF, booked him shabbily at various points in his life when he was trying to break through and about to break through, but they didn't let him or want him to until finally he did. And he's not somebody who even does this strictly for the money anymore. And he can still work Japan, as we mentioned. And if there's any reason to want to go to Mexico anymore, he can still do that. Depending on whatever their pandemic fucking condition is down there. So I believe that. Do you? I mean, that's not far-fetched.
I think it's a good move for both parties. Obviously, it's a great move for AEW. You're getting a legit wrestling star, someone who fans treat seriously, someone who's really good at everything he does, someone who'll be a great representative of the company. For Daniel Bryan, you get a lighter schedule. You get what I'm going to assume for him is going to be a really fun, friendly backstage environment. You get the opportunity to be as creative as you want, or some cases maybe not want to be. You get to work with your pick of guys, more than likely in AEW, in New Japan, or in Mexico. He has financial independence. He's done really well for himself. And now it's time for him to do something that he'll actually enjoy with wrestling, because a lot of these guys, a lot of guys who have signed with AEW, a lot of guys who in the future will sign with AEW, are going to be guys who have the opportunity to go back to WWE. Maybe not dollar for dollar the same deal, but they're going to ask themselves, where am I going to be happy? I'm still going to make a lot of money, but where am I going to be happy? And I think for a Daniel Bryan, AEW is the perfect place for him.
Now here's the question. What are they going to do to Bryan Danielson to somehow make him part of the circus? Is he going to be an island unto himself? Is it going to be that all the silliness is confined to the other segments and he can go in and be the best in-ring worker in the business, or however they're going to market him? Or is he going to be out there playing with kids and doing bad television? This is a serious question, because who have they gotten, no matter what their star power or previous reputation, that they haven't immediately put into skits with children and made them less than one of the boys already instantly. Besides Paul White and Mark Henry, they can't do that with the announcers because they don't interact with the wrestlers that much. But otherwise, who?
Yeah, instead they showed us Paul White didn't know how to work a scale. But I think with Daniel Bryan, it presents a unique opportunity. And if you look at the AEW roster from when they first got on TNT and you look at it and you say that's like the original roster, so just additions since then, there haven't been too many that have been done, in my eyes, well. Again, they haven't had anyone the size of star as Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson, I guess we should get used to calling him again right now.
Yeah.
So we've seen Christian Cage come in, and there was some, it's unfair. I was going to say there was some initial excitement about what they do with him, and that was after the disappointment because they were building it was going to be this big star, and people expected a Daniel Bryan and a Brock Lesnar and a CM Punk. That may have been one of the times recently we talked about it. And then Christian Cage, and since that time, what have they done with him? They teased an Omega feud. He randomly showed up a few times. He started doing promos for Jungle Boy, and now he's feuding with his rival from 20 plus years ago.
And so I don't buy that everybody that comes in is just an idiot and just doesn't know how they should be presented or how things they shouldn't be doing when they're just starting in the company. So one has to think that Tony Khan does not go to these guys and say, okay, what do you want to do? He's coming up with shit for them to do, obviously. And they're not arguing enough about it. Will Bryan Danielson be different?
No. I mean, maybe it won't be as stupid, but maybe it will. I mean, he did comedy stuff with Kane. I remember watching them in a restaurant argue over yes and no. And it was stupid. They were adults acting like children, besides the fact one of them was in a red outfit in the middle of a restaurant. I mean, the whole thing was ridiculous now that I think about it, but he's done these comedy skits in the past, so I think he'll do it. And, to my overall point that I've made this before, the AEW week-to-week booking and the formatting of the show is atrocious, but that's not really what it's about. It's about the pay-per-view. And I think they'll be able to set Daniel Bryan up in several matches that are real matches that people want to see more than they would want to see a Christian Cage, quite frankly, against Kenny Omega. I think Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega is a much bigger match than Christian Cage versus Kenny Omega. I think Bryan Danielson versus, if CM Punk's in there, that was the match I told you a while back they could sell out a stadium with. And it looks like they're about to sell out that stadium, and both guys may end up being there that day anyway. So we'll see what happens.
Well, and here's, before we talk about the other fella, so what you're saying is basically, and I kind of agree with you now that I'm thinking about it, it doesn't matter what kind of tomfoolery Bryan Danielson is in on the weekly television show. And I don't know that he's necessarily going to move the needle on the ratings that much because the people that are really into Bryan Danielson are already watching the show, and the people that are really into the WWE probably ain't going to watch AEW. But he'll be worth whatever they're paying him on pay-per-view for at least the first year, because if they have 4 pay-per-views and line him up with what the AEW fans see as a dream match, it doesn't matter what the promotion is or what the angle is behind it or what the fucking promos are like, because they just want to see a dream match that they haven't seen before. And that'll draw on pay-per-view for the first year. So you're probably right there, and that it's a good, hopefully they won't put him on TV any more than they have to fucking screw him up, so he'll even draw better on the pay-per-views. That's
the other problem, though. I was thinking the same thing as you were saying that. Well, hopefully they don't have too many free Bryan Danielson matches on TV, because it will water down the eventual match on pay-per-view, but
just having him on TV in general will make him
they're about to launch a second
valuable
show
to the public.
I mean, part of the reason I have to think that they're doing all these signings, and look at how many there have been in just a very short period of time, they're about to launch another show. They've signed, in the last month and a half, they've signed Andrade, Malachi Black. I just read Jake Roberts signed a new 2-year deal. A 2-year deal.
To do what?
They brought in Chavo.
This is his dream job. He walks to the ring, stands there, has a disgusted look on his face at what he's looking at, and walks off. And every 6 months, he takes a semi-bump.
They just signed Thunder Rosa to a deal. They finally got her. They got Mark Henry just a few months ago.
Hopefully, she will be the new coach of the women's division.
I think that they are on right now a bit of a tear of signing people up. And they have another show. So they're going to have 2 YouTube shows, their main Wednesday show and now the Friday show, which will never be the main show because we've seen what Friday numbers are. They're trying to get as much talent as possible. I think what's going to be interesting if they do, in fact, get, as all signs are pointing to, Bryan Danielson, perhaps a CM Punk. This is a promotion that has made very few roster removals.
And that's what I was going to add. Well, let's talk about CM Punk for a second, because that also is news that CM Punk is close to a deal, or they've made a deal, it's under wraps, or whatever the case may be. Those are the rumors that are being reported. Again, as a matter of fact, that's probably the best move they could make, because there's been more mystery and more demand and more CM Punk, whatever, just to get him back in the business some way. As a matter of fact, once again, if certain NDA clauses were not signed at one point, he might have been the person that I would say you need to break your bank to get him and then build everything else around him at this point. That's what I would have said back then if I hadn't signed any NDAs. But the problem then begins again. CM Punk is a guy who said he didn't want to go back to the WWE because he didn't want to be another guy doing bad television. Well, does CM Punk believe that he is going to have the power, the pull, the cachet, the responsibility to take care of everything involving him and anybody he interacts with, so that it's not bad, stupid, counterproductive television? Again, for the same reasons you mentioned Daniel Bryan, he'll probably have it. It'll be a more friendlier backstage environment, a lesser schedule, work once a week, whatever the case. He can do anything else he wants, but he was already doing that to begin with. But how do you and here's the thing also, even if you're doing Shakespeare in segment 5 and 6, if you have the trained monkeys in seg 4 and the dancing bear in seg 8 on the same show, are you still not a person doing something good on a bad television program? So does that get into how have they been able to persuade CM? How many zeros might have persuaded Punk to still be on a shitty show just with more control over what he actually does?
And again, we don't know what kind of potential deal he would have. Would it be a full-time contract? Or would it be more akin to a Brock Lesnar kind of deal where you pop in and out, which may actually be the best way to truly use your star power, but we don't know what his deal is and what or how much he'll be working there.
Honestly, that would be a better way to do it, is make him, as we talked about earlier in the show, an attraction. 4 big events a year and TVs to lead up to them. Maybe not that, depends on how it goes, but get the value for the enormous amount of money you're going to have to pay CM Punk out of the pay-per-views, because that's where you can generate income. As we mentioned, the program we're about to talk about here in a few minutes did 1.1 million people, which was up from 1 million people, which was up from 850,000 people, which was where they were when they were down from 1 million people. It's that range. And you can't tell me that adding even 100,000 people a week just because one guy is there is going to be possible on a regular basis. And I don't know if you'd make your money back on a deal of that size on television, but you certainly would on pay-per-view if you can protect. They're still the last one still doing pay-per-view. If you can protect Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson and CM Punk and not make them less valuable than they are when you sign them by exposing them on your television, which is what's happened to so many other people, they can still make a ton of money on pay-per-view, especially right off the bat. But they're not cutting any. I think back to Kerry Silkin's words when I was it was WrestleMania weekend of 2010, because we went to Phoenix and had 2 shows in Phoenix. And that's when I just started the previous fall, and I was trying to, network contacts, whatever, try to make him some money or save him some money or whatever. And he's sitting there with everybody in his office, Adam Pearce and Sid and the merchandise weasel. And they told him he bought 42 plane tickets that weekend because nobody lives anywhere near Phoenix, right? It's not close to anything. And he said, what the fuck is this? What am I running? Make-A-Wish? 42 fucking tickets. And that's when I had to sit him down and say, go over your talent roster. What do you pay them? Where do they live? How much do you have involved in their trance? Make your list and then come up with 10 guys that you could leave off and the people wouldn't set the seats on fire and it wouldn't drastically sabotage your wrestling show. And he did, and it saved him like fucking $4,000 per event. If not, I think it was more. And I said, then do that. So at some point, he's going to have to realize he's already had buyer's remorse, Tony Khan I'm talking about, on a lot of the outlaw friends that he signed to begin with, because we were hearing the stories in MLW and the summer of 2019. He was signing these outlaw guys that were getting nowhere near the amount of money that he was paying them for any other matches, any other promoter anywhere. He's paying them like 3 and 4 and 5 times as much, signing them to contracts. Nobody even knew who the fuck they were. And several of those names that I heard were barely on television the first year. And all they've done is sign people and sign announcers and sign legends and sign to the point where, remember, several weeks ago, I said, is Vince rope-a-doping this guy? Like, please spend as much money as you can to sign all these fucking people that I don't really want so that you will fucking go broke on what you've got. And now if he's opening up his daddy's checkbook for Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, or another name that we haven't mentioned yet, Strong Broman?
Well, no. There's no rumors right now about him going to AEW. The rumor is that WWE may want to bring back Braun Strowman because of the fear that AEW could sign him and debut him.
Well, see, I think that rumor is mistake. If they let him go just a fucking month or 6 weeks ago, I would be, if I was Vince, going, yes, please give this big slug $2 million of your money. And you'll see what I ended up with, which was not much.
You know, the interesting thing, too, about Punk and Bryan Danielson, obviously Punk can use his name, Bryan Danielson, close enough, as close as you can get. They could probably both use their entrance music from WWE, because Bryan Danielson used Flight of the Bumblebee, and CM Punk used Cult of Personality by Living Colour. Tony Khan has no problem licensing music. They're going to come out there to the music they came out to on WWE TV.
Hey, did I tell you when whatever year it was that Punk did the pipe bomb promo and they were trying to sign him and bring him back so that Triple H could flatten him, kill his heat since he got over by himself? As soon as the contract negotiations were up in the air and everybody was buzzing, as soon as he came back out on their TV and they played Cult of Personality, I said, okay, this guy got everything from Vince McMahon he ever asked for. And Cliff, no brown M&Ms, he got that because Vince hates to license music. So that would, I can see that, and that would be a huge fucking pop. Punk coming out in a big building to that song could get a Cena-like pop like we were talking about that he got the other night.
You may have a babyface problem in the world of AEW, despite it being an old wrestling trope. But I would be intrigued down the road after you get through all this. I would be intrigued by CM Punk and Cody Rhodes in a feud. I don't know about the match, but the feud and the promos, I would be very interested in that. That would be good.
Cody would have to switch heel. Cody would have to be.
There's no way Punk could be a heel now, right? No way.
I don't think so, nor should he be.
What if he comes out there and starts doing the Jim Cornette promo, the Dan Lambert promo? I haven't been here because I think you are all a bunch of jerk-offs. The Young Bucks are ridiculous, and Kenny Omega's ridiculous, and I've taken Tony Khan's money, kind of like a pipe bomb promo. I'm taking Tony Khan's money, and I'm coming here, and guess what? Now I'm an executive vice president.
Nope, that would not happen because the Bucks and Twinkle Toes wouldn't let it happen. And also, they had Dan Lambert, who's a guy they can make fun of, saying those things, and everybody could laugh. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But if CM Punk said those things, people would listen to it. And they would, even if they hadn't thought that, they would go, you know what? If Punk says it, yeah, I think they're kind of fucking, he's right. So they ain't going to be doing that.
If you are one of these guys that Tony Khan is talking to or has just signed about coming in, and you're someone who's going to be getting six figures, you're someone who's a sizable wrestling star, you're someone who's going to certainly be lending a lot to AEW. Now,
you don't think Punk or Bryan is talking six figures now?
No, I wouldn't if I was them. No, you go right to seven figures.
Yes. Yeah. They're not six-figure guys.
And Punk already has a deal with Pro Wrestling Tees, so he could probably just keep all of his merch, too. I would hope. Punk, negotiate that, too.
Well, now, see, here's the thing. That's why I was saying you wouldn't want Punk to be a baby or to be a heel, not only because he's fresh and brand new, but because he would be selling shitloads of merchandise. You would want Cody to be a heel because he's jealous of this fucking tattooed up freak coming in here, interrupting his goddamn reality TV show.
But if you're
I could buy.
But if you're one of these guys of this stature coming in, do you say, hey, I want to be executive vice president too? I want health insurance.
Well, I think if I was one of those guys, I'd say, hey, I want health insurance, but I don't want, for a million years, I don't want to be one of your executive vice presidents. I just want the money and the insurance. And I don't think either one of those guys would want the headache that would come along with having to work with, in any official capacity, the other executive vice presidents or contribute to the overall success of the company in that respect rather than what they could do in the ring.
We've seen companies get hot for brief periods of time, like, look at the promotional war in Montreal in 72. Like, we've seen what happens. And I got to say, right now, AEW has the momentum. WWE is stature, but AEW has momentum. They're selling out this tennis stadium in New York. That's a big moment for them. They have a lot going on. Do you think this is the time to double down and just invest on as much talent as possible? And, I mean, that's... If you see a star out there like that, do you grab him or do you even think about it?
Well, yes, you grab Daniel Bryan. You grab CM Punk. I'd leave Strong Broman alone. But they do have momentum, but it's the same thing as when they asked Shitstain. They said, well, what are you going to do when business goes down? Booking like this. He's, if we do it right, it'll never go down. It always goes down. Same thing. They're signing stars. They're signing names off the other television. This happened in the mid to late 90s, as you'll recall. And yes, as long as they can keep signing these new names and hot-shotting these themed television shows and hot-shotting the pay-per-views and blah, 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 especially with their audience, which loves hot-shotting because they love chaos, they're going to have momentum, but sooner or later, there's nobody left to sign. There's nobody new. You've hit the wall. You can't shoot any more angles. You can't set anybody else on fire. So no, the time when you've got this much momentum is to take who you've already got and fucking polish it up to be as good as it possibly can and go out and have all these shows with this giant array of talent already, instead of trying to collect a bunch of people, drop them all like a fucking cow pie in the road and see if anybody, who smells what. You can't get over 20 new guys all at the same time, even if people already know who they are. You can't feature them, even with these multiple TV shows, especially when they have these 20-minute matches that don't mean anything on their 2-hour television program. They really have a good selection of talent for a 2-hour program, but you don't see half of them because they put the wrong people on the show and they let them stay out there for half an hour. So, no, I wouldn't just go crazy and sign, because what happens when their momentum fucking peters out this fall when some other sport's having tournaments on fucking television, or there's no new shocking surprises to sign, or people have seen 85,000 exploding matches. And then they're like, oh shit, we still got to pay all these fucking guys. Deal with what you've got and get that in good shape first.
Let's not forget they have unlimited capital.
Well, sooner or later, Daddy might get upset. And then Daddy will say sell. Anyway, you want to talk about this television program they presented the other night? We've knocked everybody else's business. We might as well knock theirs. You never said yes, you want to talk about it. I'll just assume you're humoring me.
Yeah, well, you kind of went on. I didn't know if I was still supposed to jump in with an answer.
Well, you're not. You're supposed to just say yes. When I say jump, you're supposed to say how high. And then you're supposed to say, ouch, I pulled something.
What I meant to say was, do we have to do this?
Apparently. People expect it because everybody is. I'm glad I don't get on Twitter at night because my Twitter blew up the other night with, oh my God, have you seen this? They've gone full garbage, Brian. Never go full garbage. But instantly, my Twitter blew up because they led the program. This is July 21st we're talking about, by the way. They led the program with the first labor of Hercules Jericho. Boy, he doesn't look like Steve Reeves, Jericho, anymore. He doesn't even look like George Reeves anymore. He doesn't even...
Oh, don't, just stop.
What?
But wherever you're going to go with George Reeves, just stop.
No, I'm just saying, famous people named Reeves that looked good physically. He don't look like any of them. Anyway, the first labor of Jericho was a match between Jericho and Shawn Spears where Shawn Spears gets to use a chair, but Jericho doesn't. And this led the program. The real fans now are back, the paying fans, not the paid fans that were paid to sing Judas. And the real fans are trying to sing it. But if you notice from the camera shot, half of them kind of mumbled over half the words. So they need to put out a lyric sheet, I think. They get the chorus, but sometimes on the build-up, they went a little sideways. So they have to work this match as if the guy with the chair can't just beat and pummel the fuck out of the guy that doesn't have the chair. That's the premise of this, right? Because elsewise it would have been flat. And so Spears has the chair, and he's circling around with Jericho, and Jericho punches him, and he immediately drops the chair. And then they start having a match. And then they went to the floor forever. Jericho got a pop using the floor camera. He stole that from Joe Walsh and the Eagles reunion tours, right? Where he put the camera on top of his head and made the crowd wave at him. So he knows all the tricks, Jericho. Did you see? Actually, this was the thing. Jericho had this match. He worked it like Roger Waters does the live performances of The Wall now. Did you see that? Have you ever seen Roger Waters do The Wall?
Is that where he does some songs and then he walks behind the wall, disappears for a while, and then he comes back?
He's 70 fucking years old now, so he'll go out there and he'll do his vocal part, and then he'll walk slowly during those long Pink Floyd instrumentals from one side of the stage, and he'll raise his hands. And then he'll walk to the other side of the stage and raise his hands, and then they'll do a lighting treatment, and he'll disappear behind the wall, and you don't see him for 3 or 4 minutes. He's probably back there with an oxygen tank. Well, Jericho is working now like Roger Waters does The Wall. A lot of crowd milk, a lot of gesticulating, not a lot of follow-through on the moves, and the heel has to come to him. But the winner of this match was never in doubt, but the chair stipulation made it even worse because they were having to figure out ways where Shawn Spears didn't just fucking obliterate Jericho with the chair. So it was a basic wrestling match with some chair shortcuts. Did you notice? I'll give him credit. Jericho pulled off the Hurricane Rana off the top, and the people popped like crazy, but it was followed by punches that couldn't have broken my Aunt Lola's fever blisters. So he was saving his cardio for that. So basically, Spears goes to hit Jericho with the chair. Jericho blocks it with a double leg, gets the walls of Jericho. Tully distracts Aubrey. Spears is tapping. Sammy Guevara comes out and runs Tully off, and they just go away. Spears hits his finish and gets a 2 count. The people were staying in it. They put this together with a lot of smoke and mirrors. I'm pretty sure Jericho worked on this, I will admit. And then Spears tried to put Jericho on his shoulders and then put the chair on Jericho's back like he was going to do his finish where he does the forward flip on. This was way busy. But Jericho slipped out and fucking hit the Judas 1, 2, 3. So the chair didn't even come to play in the finish, but that wasn't the biggest problem. Let's go ahead and get to it. So Jericho wins. Spears is fucking down. MJF comes out and introduces next week's challenger in the second labors of Hercules Jericho. Nick Gage. And out comes this toothless, meth head looking 5'9", 200-pound schlub dressed in his various scrubby trailer park clothing, waving a fucking pizza cutter while, what did they have, 5,000 people in Dallas, Texas?
Maybe about that.
4,500 of them turned to each other and went, "Who's that?"
Maybe a greater number than that.
The bank-addicted drug robber on national television. They have gone full garbage. And it's not even a rib on me. They think this will be good. Brian, where do I start? They take this guy, number one, he's got brain damage, whether it's from the drugs or from headshots or whatever, we don't know, but you can tell there's something going on. He was just the subject of a nationally broadcast cable program that illustrated that not only is he a garbage deathmatch freak, but also a convicted bank robber and either a former or, depending on what's going on these days, current drug user. And we've laughed on this program when we said he got out of fucking jail and then went back to jail for revoking his parole and got out of jail from that. And these outlaw mud show groups continued booking him. But now this is national television. And because John Moxley, who we've seen several times fawning over this scum-sucking freak, and the rest of these mark goofs in the locker room, oh, deathmatch, yeah. And wow, he was on Dark Side of the Ring, so he'll get that audience too. Why would you want the deathmatch audience? Have you seen these people talking about low IQ supporters? Have you seen not just the scum that gets in the ring, the human scum, the breathing scum that gets in the ring to perform this deathmatch torture porn, as somebody on the internet called it, but the demented mental cases and sick fucking freaks that populate the barns and rec centers in numbers of 2 and 250 people that actually pay to watch morons perpetrate this. They're talking about low IQ supporters, and they've just brought this guy onto their television program. Hey, they may get canceled around about the time that I thought they might if they show this guy on TV. If anybody from TNT is watching, especially if they try to top what they've already done on this program. Can you imagine? Again, when you have a mark in charge, this is what happens. Because somebody either likes this guy or is tickled by this guy, like I said, Moxley, or they think he's a freak and it'll get eyes on him because, let's face it, this is all a freak show now. They think it'll get some eyes on him, the freak eyes. Can you imagine pitching this to Vince McMahon, who, despite what anybody thinks of him, and despite the shitty product that they're putting out, still runs a professional organization? Hey, Vince, got an idea. We're going to have one of your top guys go against this guy. He works death matches in front of very few people. He's actually died in one of them. He bled out punctured an artery and had to be airlifted, but he was dead for about 8 minutes. Oh, that's because he was on drugs, is when he robbed that bank and got on camera and was on the TV news. He went to prison for a while for that, but now he's out. He may or may not have kicked the drugs, but oh, did you see that he sliced the carotid artery of a D-list movie star here a couple years ago? So this will really get us some publicity. I've never seen Vince McMahon pick up something and just strike somebody over the head, but I believe it would happen there. Oh. Do you know, and also, do you remember, are you old enough, Brian? Did they still have the freak show when you started going to fairs?
No, they did not.
Say, okay, well, they did when I was a kid. Not just at the county fairs, but they had the big one, the big freak show on the Midway at the Kentucky State Fair every year. When I was 6, 7, 8, you give them a quarter, you go in, you can see the world's fattest man. Of course, now that I have been around wrestling for a while and have a way to judge people's size, I realize that the world's fattest man was just this 600-pound black guy wearing fucking tiny, teeny shorts and no shirt, sitting, and whenever the women would come in, he would take one of his tits in his hand and bounce it up and down, and they'd go, oh! Or the bearded lady, or the incredible strange thing that's in a jar, and you have to look in the jar and figure out what it is, and everybody's got their own ideas. And they actually not only had a human freak show, and of course that's where you'd see the sword swallower and everything too, but they had an animal freak show, because Kentucky, of course, obviously the Kentucky State Fair has a livestock exhibition, so you'd get to see the 5-legged cow and the 2-headed sheep, and these were real things. The human freaks and the midgets and the giants and they were kind of worked, but the animal freaks were real. But you know where the word geek originally came from?
That comes from the carnival. Yeah, that's what I was going to say, yeah.
Because geek in today's, he's a geek, like he's a nerd, right? It's taken on that kind of meaning sometimes, or a lot of people just heard pencil neck geek from Fred Blassie, and okay, it's an insult. But a geek in the old days of the carnivals and the fairs was the lowest of the low. Chances are there was something going on with him mentally. There was nothing that he was in any way, no line of work that he was suited for, no profession that he could accomplish. He had to figure out some way to support himself, so a kind of guy like that would be the geek at the fair. The lowest of the low, the guy that would do anything for money. He's the guy that would bite the head off the live chicken at the freak show, on the sideshow, on the Midway. He's the kind of guy that would do whatever chore was needed to be done, because he wasn't even really considered a real legitimate human being. He was just the geek over in the corner. They don't let people do that anymore. They don't have freak shows. They don't even have the Elephants and Ringling Brothers now. So, of course, this stuff has all gone away. So it's popped back up as what they call deathmatch wrestling. That's where all the geeks, the lowest of the low, the people that have no talent, the people there's something wrong with them mentally, they can't exist in society in a polite, friendly manner. So instead, they're paid pittances to mutilate themselves, bite the heads off live animals, or engage in other subhuman behavior for the entertainment of people who probably aren't that swift themselves. Nick Gage is the modern day circus sideshow geek. And that's what they have decided to bring onto their national television show. What's next? The 2-headed cow and the guy that eats live pigeons?
If he starts working indie shows, yes.
Yes. And I know a lot of people have said, oh, but Jim Cornette, you booked New Jack. Yeah, I did. I booked a guy who had never done a death match or any other type of garbage wrestling, who was a trained professional, and whose only questionable background at the time that we were aware of was that he had actually been a bail bond officer. Bounty hunter is a little glorious of a term, but a bail bond enforcer. He had been going out and getting the bad guys. That's his story at the time. New Jack had never stabbed anybody in a wrestling match because we wouldn't let him. New Jack had never thrown anybody off a scaffold because he didn't have one, or tasered anybody because we wouldn't let him. What people do after I book them is unfortunately out of my control. And then people brought up Bruiser Bedlam. And I got to be honest with you, even as much as I liked Bruiser, if it had been after he was accused of blowing up the police station and being involved in the, let's say, neutralization of the attorney and etc., I probably wouldn't have booked him. But I saw him on a wrestling show. He had a background as Johnny K9 working for the WWF. I saw him on a show where he was a pleasant guy, had a good match. The promoter enjoyed having him there. I talked to him, talked to other people about him. Yeah, he's a great guy. Yeah, he needs a break. Yes, he'd been in prison. Many people have. Don't they deserve a second chance? So we gave him one, and he was a model employee and never broke even a traffic law the whole time he worked for me. Years later, whatever he may have been involved in, I was not there. However, as I mentioned, I booked a guy who was in jail at one point and told a story of how he got the tattoo, but I didn't book a guy that had been accused of murder and blowing up a police station. Even if I liked him, that would probably have been a little bit too far, and I wouldn't have enjoyed the publicity. But in this case, yes, the guy is a garbage wrestler that has sliced people's throats and died in the middle of the ring because he's a fucking mental case and he feels the need to mutilate himself in front of these goddamn weirdos that this stuff appeals to. He's also a convicted bank robber that went back to jail for fucking, not revoking, but breaking his parole. All the while he was abusing drugs constantly, according to his own lips and his own testimony and that of his wonderful, intelligent girlfriend on Dark Side of the Ring, who was right there with him at the casino with the stolen money doing drugs. And now they're booking him to get in the ring with a guy that used to be one of the biggest stars in professional wrestling. Maybe Daniel Bryan and CM Punk better put a no Nick Gage clause in their contracts, or elsewise they'll have to interact with this fucking kid. Have I explained just what type of subhuman filth that I believe the garbage deathmatch people and their ilk and their supporters are? Have I done that in plain enough testimony? Then we can move on.
I think you have explained how you feel about garbage match wrestling, yes.
Oh, God. So what do you think they're going to do next week to beat the main event that we're still about to talk about here? They're going to have to top that some way, because Nick Gage, one thing that you can tell is real about him is that he really does believe that he's some kind of fucking wrestling star, and I bet you he'll kill himself or somebody else to prove it.
Yeah, to me, I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying, but the bank robbery thing to me isn't the big problem. Because I look at a guy who was a junkie, desperate, down on his luck, who went to rob a bank without a weapon, without a mask. You know what?
He came out with a weapon to fucking do a promo on wrestling, but he goes to rob a bank empty-handed. Go ahead.
So I'm going to look past that. I don't think that's a disqualifier to me. No one was hurt except himself in that case.
What about the publicity?
I'm not disagreeing with you on that, but I'm just saying for me, that's not the big issue. For me, the big issue is, can this guy work a match, or is it just going to be nothing but a garbage match? And if it's that case, is it going to be any more special or different than any of the other ones we've recently seen on TV? Obviously, the audience in Texas, and I would think an audience in Texas would react this way, had no idea who he was. It would be different here in the Northeast because you'd have a larger group of smart fans in this area that would congregate at a show. They would pop for him. And the pizza cutter thing, to me, maybe it's just because I've eaten a lot of pizza, doesn't seem like an intimidating thing. I cut bread and cheese with it. You're not a
fucking death match, garbage match, idiot Mark. Oh my God, he's cutting his tongue with a pizza cutter.
See, what you're missing is that it's not the labors of Jericho. It's the labors of the audience having to watch these segments. And I think the other reason why I really don't care, and I've said it before, until MJF's done with this Jericho thing, and it looks like we have another 5 weeks of this or whatever to go, everything he does, I'm just not really paying that much attention to. He's doing the worst stuff of his career. It's lame. It's poorly booked. No matter how good his promos could be, the next week he gets pissed in the mouth. Or he gets piss in his mouth, I guess I should say.
Piss on my ass.
But I don't care about the Jericho MJF thing. It's gone on too long. I will say one other thought, and I'm the only one who thinks this, and I recognize that. When Sami ran in for the big babyface run-in, I don't know. I'm not feeling it with Sami as the young babyface. There are other people on that roster.
I told you.
Who I would give that role to. Sami is a natural for the young heel to feud with them, not as the young babyface. Hopefully the Inner Circle changes back heel after Jericho gets back from his tour. Yeah. But...
Well, you said also if Nick Gage could work a match. Well, if he could work a fucking match, he wouldn't be doing garbage wrestling. But besides that, there are many wrestlers that could work a match that could be rewarded that haven't done garbage wrestling. I am insulted when a legitimate, so-called legitimate company, so-called legitimate promoter would hire a piece of shit like this, who has done this garbage wrestling and is proud of it and continues to do it and is going to do it probably till the day he dies. And why would you reward this fucking guy, this fucking weirdo, and his goofy behavior by actually letting him achieve his dream and being involved in a real company? A real wrestling promotion, if that's indeed what you claim to be. Why would you reward this scum and make the whole business look bad by saying, okay, it's not just that garbage deathmatch wrestling that people do and you see it on some other television programs, but we don't want anything to do with it because we're a real wrestling promotion. They bring the fucking poster boy for stupid and put him on their television program just to get an extra maybe 100,000 people in the world, if there's that. The Nick Gage episode of Dark Side of the Ring was the lowest rated episode of the show in history. So are you going to pull your dick out on the street corner next and wave it around to get attention? How desperate, that looks desperate to appeal to the lowest common denominator of human beings just to get an extra few eyeballs on your fucking program. If that's, why else would they be doing this? There are 20 million wrestlers that are talented, that haven't done this stuff, that probably could be rewarded with at least one nice payday.
I'll make you a bet, and I don't know the answer, and I haven't asked anyone there yet. Not that anyone there talks to me. But I'll bet you this is Jericho, not Tony Khan. Not that Tony Khan didn't approve it and say, okay, put it on my TV, and he's guilty of that. But I'll bet you anything this is Jericho trying to stay in touch with the young people. Saw this guy on Dark Side. He narrated Dark Side, Jericho.
Well, yeah, Jericho narrated, but I bet you Moxley was like, oh, yeah, you got to give this fucking creep a chance because he does all the shit that I fantasize about doing. But I actually got a real job. Because that's where Moxley's head is at. We've proven that. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, we move on from the guy that eats the live pigeons to a professional wrestling match. Luke Gallows with Carl Anderson against Frankie Kazarian. And honestly, except for the fact that the referee is just completely incompetent, this was a standard Monday Night Raw match from 2005. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing to write home about. At one point, I got a kick out of Gallows. Kazarian's punching him in the head. Boom, boom, boom. And he took the 2 seconds in between getting punched to zip up his vest at one point. But finally, Anderson interfered right in front of useless referee. What is his name? Rick Cox. Nice. And he pretended to be distracted. And Anderson then or Gallows hit his finish 1, 2, 3. So that was that. But then it got really, really bad. They start to get heat after. And all of a sudden, Gallows and Anderson are kicking the shit out of Kazarian, and music starts playing, and the heels just stop. But it's Twinkle Toes' music. But they still stopped. If they're kicking the shit out of the guy, why do they stop when their own fucking guy's music starts playing? But out comes Twinkle Toes. And by the way, what did you call Don Callis last week? You said he looked like a penis in a suit.
Yeah.
That's why somebody on the internet has now named him Don Phallus. So out comes
That's great.
Twinkle Toes and Don Phallus. And they talk their way to the ring. And here's the thing again. It turns into the South Park episode about wrestling. The heels are kicking the shit out of the babyface in the ring. The music plays. They stop. Out comes Twinkle Toes and Don Phallus with a microphone talking their way to the ring. Kazarian is still having to lay there. And nobody's doing anything. He's laying there. Nobody's touching him. Nobody's coming to stop these people that have taken over the show. Jim Ross says, is this martial law? He knows when this shit's happening. And then Twinkle Toes actually said to Kazarian, "Welcome to my humble abode," said the spider to the fly. And now they're all abusing Kazarian. There's no referees coming out. There's no bell ringing. There's no security guards coming out. The announcers are just fucking... And then Twinkle Toes, did you hear him screw up his line? He was, and I thought this was a work in some way. I said, this couldn't be this blatant or this plain. There's going to be something dealing with this later on. And no, it was. He just forgot. He was supposed to say, how does it feel that the hunter has become the hunted? But he said, how does it feel that the hunter... And then he stopped. And how does it feel that... And then Callis went over and whispered in his ear, the hunter has become the hunted. And then he said it. How does it feel that the hunter has become the hunted? And they're all standing there about to kill Kazarian. Nobody, obviously, in the whole company cares. He's got nobody coming out to help. No referees, no security, no wrestlers. The announcers are just saying, oh, well, shucks. It was nice while it lasted, but I guess they're going to kill Kazarian. And then here comes Page's music, and here comes Adam Page walking out again with the drink in his hand. It's so... If you're a goddamn raging alcoholic in the throes of end-stage fucking cirrhosis of the liver, and you've got to go fight somebody to take up for a friend, you're going to put your drink down. It's so phony and so stupid. But what he does is he fucking rolls in the ring. Kazarian rolls out. Page hands Phallus his fucking drink and starts fighting the heels. But they stop him. And they get heat on him. And then here comes, you guessed it, the Dork Order. Here's Gallows is a 6'6", 300-pound man. Here's Anderson. Here's the world champion of their company and a penis in a suit. And they have to run from miscellaneous masked job guys with Sharpie markers on their chests and Colt Cabana. I don't even know if Colt was in there. I never know. I think he just ducks down and only pops up to get his check. And excrement on commentary. It's the Dork Order to even the odds. There's twice as many of the Dork Order as there was the heels. So now all the baby faces outnumber and beat up the fucking heels. But they made Carl Anderson take all the bumps. What the fuck was this segment all about? Help me.
The whole segment, I don't know. I didn't care at all about the match. Despite everything they've done with Frankie Kazarian, it didn't seem like the fans there were really into the whole elite hunter gimmick. They didn't even call him that when he came to the ring, or at least Justin Roberts did and the announcers did.
Maybe if he moved to Japan, they would care about because their whole... Everybody involved in this company, and apparently all the fans of this company, have the fantasy that one day they will move to Japan where they can see Riho every day.
I don't think anyone cares about Gallows. To me, this was like seeing, I don't know, what was the DOA? 8-Ball against Leaf Cassidy on Raw. Like, this is just a match here.
Ooh, not even Skull, but 8-Ball?
And then they associate the main event program with this. And I'm sorry. I don't feel as strongly as you about Omega. I've said it, but to me, he feels like an Intercontinental champion, not a world champion. He doesn't look like a world champion. He doesn't act like a world champion. And he gets more and more gimmicky is not the word, just more cartoonish as a heel each week to the point where it's just silly. It's just, again, this is their version of Raw as opposed to a new take, a modern take on pro wrestling.
Well, yeah, you've said it. It's like a Disney Channel villain, right? So if they clearly said we're going to do a wrestling show for children under 12 or 13 that, could be scared or offended by real villains, that may be said, but then they have real violence and real blood. So the program is aimed for a childlike mentality, but featuring shit that children shouldn't see and that adults think is silly, except for the adults who think like children. Possibly a low IQ audience.
And Adam Page never runs to the ring. He always has to have a little drink. He was spilling it on himself as he walked to the ring before he handed it off. I don't know. And you associated the Dork Order with the main event feud. The Bucks were lucky. They weren't even there this week.
No, we were lucky.
Yeah, they were lucky too. They weren't there this week, but we were lucky too. I wasn't. This whole segment sucked to me. And if I could say one thing to go back to the Jericho segment real quick.
Go ahead.
I think Jericho versus Nick Gage will probably be the easiest match Jericho could have because he is struggling, like you said, working in these matches. He's struggling with the basic things, and he's an older guy, and he's not in shape anymore. I think a death match against Nick Gage more than likely would be the easiest thing for him to do.
Well, but okay, easy, because, you can have a death match with no talent whatsoever. I could have a fucking death match if I was willing to be sliced open and hit with shit. But what's harder on Jericho? Having an athletic match or rolling around with all those gimmicks and sharp things where something could happen and you got to trust this fucking drug-addled bank robber to protect you? Fuck that. It'd be safe against somebody that knew what they were doing to have a street fight kind of weapons match, but not a Nick Gage kind of match. I'm sure that they will be telling him to tone it down for television and for Jericho's well-being, but then you don't get the full human scum experience. You get Nick Gage light.
If you're booking Nick Gage,
it's a ridiculous idea.
If you're booking Nick Gage and you know he has his pizza cutter, do you try to get a sponsorship with a Domino's or a Papa John's for next week's Labor of Jericho match?
No, you don't, for the same reason that somebody asked me that when I first went to the WWF. They said, have you ever tried to get a sponsorship with a tennis racket company? I said, why would they sponsor me when I'm hitting people over the head that the fans love with it in order to fuck them out of money and championships? And they're like, yeah, you may be right. Then they started spray painting because I'd just get my rackets at fucking Walmart, right? It'd say Wilson or whatever. They started spray painting the logo off the racket. I'd carried it on TBS for fucking 6 years at that point, but WWF was like, oh, that's a logo. Oh, good Lord. Anyway, the next match on this parade of terror, you got to try to explain this one to me. Wheeler Yuta, who's a fine-looking young man, with our little dog Pockets in his corner, because now Pockets is some way taking an interest in him, against Darby Allin with Sting in his corner. Wheeler Yuta gets on national TV at the expense of his dignity by playing second fiddle to the fucking company mascot in his corner. And Darby Allin is matched against a job guy with another quote-unquote babyface in his corner, opposing the icon Sting, who is now put in a position where he is opposing one of the more popular people on this fucking roster of misfits, our little dog Pockets. How does this make sense? When do the good guys in the movies fight amongst each other? If they're not taking this seriously as a business, as a sport, when do the good guys in When they were fucking doing the heist in Ocean's 11, when did they stop and fucking fight each other and then go back and rob the goddamn casino?
I can't explain this segment.
So, obviously, I wasn't going to watch this, except I'd seen somebody say something about it on Twitter, so I had to watch. Sting in pockets at one point, everybody's down in the ring, and Sting did the fake kicks with pockets. And everybody's like, Sting, well, explain this, Cornette. I will explain it. It's not a surprise. We've talked about this. Sting has never been devoted to the wrestling business. Sting has never been a fan of the wrestling business. Sting has been in the wrestling business for 36 years now, and for 34 of those years, they have paid him ridiculous amounts of money to be, in varying degrees, a version of himself. He has never been fascinated by or enamored by the art of the wrestling business or the history of it or the credibility of it or the whatever the fuck. He wanted to quit 10, 12 years ago, and Dixie Carter wouldn't quit giving him $10,000 a week just to come to TV so he could retire. And then he was done, and the WWF inducts him in the Hall of Fame and gives him a couple of pay-per-view payoffs of six figures, I'm sure, a piece, and nearly paralyzed him. And now the biggest money mark of all time, to relive his childhood when he was booking his fantasy federation, I'm talking about Tony Khan, and watching Sting on TV. He has given Sting enough money, I'm assuming well into seven figures, that all Sting has to do is come to this fucking building, walk to the ring, put up with some foolishness, and every 3 months have a cinematic match or some kind of goddamn physical skirmish for which he's getting paid more money than he's ever been paid in his life. That's why, and Sting don't give a fuck. This is not important to him like his church services or whatever. This is only wrestling to Sting. So it's not as serious as his superstitions. And that's why he was doing fake shin kicks with fucking pockets. So of all the people that have ever done that, he is the least amount of surprise to me, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Because he don't give a fuck. But I was embarrassed for him, though, how the mighty have fallen. What'd you think?
Garbage segment. Not surprised by Sting doing something stupid with Orange Cassidy, but you had Orange Cassidy in there with Darby. Well, actually, it wasn't with Darby. You had Wheeler Yuta, who's been on the show for 2 weeks in a row. We saw him in the Ring of Honor tournament last year. I don't know what they're doing with him, but they just threw him in there with the Best Friends and Statlander and Orange Cassidy. And then out of this, we get more of the Orange Cassidy Blade feud, which nobody is clamoring for. Didn't the Blade attack him with the brass knuckles?
I didn't actually after the shin kicks, I moved on. I didn't actually watch.
I thought it was here. Maybe it was at a different point in the show. I thought.
Well, no, I mean, it could have very well been because I didn't watch it, because why the fuck would I do that?
Yeah, the Blade came out and attacked Orange Cassidy with brass knuckles.
Oh, boy.
So he did his little dance with Sting. It was somewhat similar to Kid and Play back in the day.
What did Darby Allin and Sting do when Pockets was getting beat up with brass knuckles?
I think they went to the concession stand. I'm not sure.
Which is another reason why you don't have a goddamn afterbirth and an angle after you have a babyface match, because then you got all the babyfaces standing around watching another babyface get the shit kicked out of him. Jesus Christ. All righty. The women's title was up next. The long-awaited confrontation between the challenger Nyla Rose with her manager Vicky Guerrero and the inimitable Dr. Britt Baker with her assistant Reba, who is on crutches again for real, I guess. That poor girl can't get a fucking break. And Britt Baker is now 100% babyface. As soon as the people have come back, and we said last week, she's being rewarded for being a great heel promo and being a personality that stands out in a sea of idiots, and being booked as a heel but never being allowed to actually get any heat. So now the people like it because at least she's fun to watch. So now she's the biggest babyface in the fucking company. And she's has Nyla Rose ever, I'm going back to the opening days of this television program where we kept saying, what the fuck? She's 3 times as big as any girl on the roster, and Riho is beating her like a fucking rented mule. Has she ever won a match where it counted on television? I think I remember her beating a job girl. How long has it been since she's wrestled on TV?
Well, she beat Riho way back for the title, right?
And then Riho beat her. Like, I remember seeing her fly for Riho like crazy. I don't know. Anyway, same thing here, except I think Nyla Rose, has given up mentally, because she used to be fearsome and had some impact to her and boom, but now it was like her boots were 50 pounds apiece and the mat was quicksand. And it just, this did not click together. So Britt Baker's a huge baby face, but, well, okay, they went to the break, right? In the middle of the match. I had to write this down. The second they come back from the break, Britt Baker shoots Nyla Rose off to the ropes. Nyla Rose hits the ropes and just stops. Doesn't come off of them, just stops there. Britt Baker walks up to her and punches her twice, and then turns around and runs and hits the far ropes 20 feet away, came off those ropes, spun in a circle, and walked right into Nyla Rose's rock bottom. I don't know what this was not Gail Kim and Awesome Kong, I'll tell you that. So finally, Britt Baker goes to get her glove and turns her back on Nyla Rose for 30 seconds. Even Tony Schiavone screaming, turn around! So she turns around and Nyla Rose goes for the choke slam. Britt Baker rolls her up and goes for the lockjaw, but Nyla Rose comes out and hits her with a Death Valley driver and then puts her on the top rope and gives the big knee off the top and gets a 2 count. But after that big move where she not only got fucking blasted with that big knee off the top, but then as Nyla Rose picks her up 10 seconds in, Britt Baker spins out and neck breakers Nyla Rose and was right back on offense, kicking her in the head. But then suddenly Nyla Rose just grabbed her and chokeslammed her and got another 2 count. But Britt Baker got right back up and did what excrement called a crucifix bomb, but was a sloppy roll-up and got a 2 count, and then got up and did the exact same roll-up, but better this time, and got another 2 count, and then did some kind of 2 curb stomps on Nyla Rose and got a 2 count, and then Nyla Rose just got back up and knocked Britt Baker out with a forearm. It's like they were doing these things just back and forth with, oh shit, nothing ever happened till this point. We're going to start fresh each time. Reba jumps up and distracts the referee, so Britt Baker, the raging babyface who got like the biggest response of the night, gets the belt so she can cheat and hit Nyla Rose with it. But instead she tosses it to Nyla Rose and falls down to do the old Eddie Guerrero thing. But Nyla Rose does the same thing. She just chucks it back to fucking Britt Baker and fucking goes down. So when the referee turns around, he just makes Britt Baker put the belt out. Nobody is selling anymore at all to all these horrible things that have happened to them. They're doing the 3-card Monty with the title belt. Nyla Rose hits a power bomb and gets a 2 count. This would not end. She immediately tries another power bomb, but within seconds, Britt Baker comes out and gets the crossface and the lockjaw and makes her tap out. So Britt Baker was power bombed. Boom, 2 count. Pull her up. Britt Baker says, no, I'm going to fucking tap you out, you 250-pound beast, right here. Boom. So the 100-pound babyface kept trying to cheat, but that didn't work. So instead, she just no-sold Nyla Rose's power bomb and tapped out the monster. Was that what you saw?
I saw a very sloppy match that was poorly put together. With an extremely over Britt Baker.
Extremely.
And we have to say, the fans there have been very, very hot. They've really been reacting to a lot of the AEW stuff, and Britt Baker was as over as anyone. And like you said, she can't be a heel now. She'll act like a heel, but be a babyface.
They have made a fad audience that refuses to take wrestling seriously and doesn't even want to see great athletic exhibitions. They want to see chaos, flipping, carnage, people screaming at each other, and they don't care that any of it makes sense because they're coming to laugh. This is worse than any expose that's ever been done on wrestling, or any crusading journalist trying to knock it, or any newspaper blowing the lid off everything and telling people the inside working. This is just the actual talent themselves encouraging a group of people to come and just laugh at what they do. Anyway, so a press conference was next. Did you love the press conference with no press or conference?
Well, the clips of it was cut pretty weirdly.
It was cut so bad. At one point, they jump cut. Santana was standing up showing pictures of his family fucking photo album, and they cut to FTR for 3 seconds, and when they go back to the long shot, Santana's still sitting there, calmly minding his own business.
Yeah, what was that? I mean, Santana was going somewhere with those photos, and we kind of never found out because they just cut to the next thing, which was FTR talking.
FTR was sitting on one side of the podium, Santana and Ortiz on the other, Tony Schiavone in the middle, in front of a background, the curtain and the logos and everything, that you could tell it was a completely silent room. There was nobody there at the press conference, and it didn't last 1 minute. It was just clips of them making comments and then edited together in a poor fashion. And basically a couple of people spoke, and then they jumped up and stood there yelling at each other for 5 to 7 seconds. Twinkle Toes and Don Fallis get 10 minutes. And this got a minute. It was edited to the point where you couldn't even follow a fucking train of thought.
That's the point. It did nothing to build to the match. Whatever they were trying to shoot, I don't know what they shot. Whatever they showed on TV did nothing to build to the match to me.
And I bet you, since, the world's greatest living wrestling artist had to go on so long, that they probably cut this down. A tag team match that we might actually like to see. Next up, Tony Schiavone was in the ring with Andre Olio and his assistant with no Alex. And Tony Schiavone got 4 words out, and Andre grabs the microphone and takes over. The Dark Order. No, takes over and has a surprise for everybody. And his assistant points to the iPad or whatever he's got in his hand, and Tony Schiavone then reads it and goes, "Oh, you have a new executive consultant," because Andre couldn't say the words executive consultant. Because Andre spoke regularly in this segment, both English and Spanish, and I couldn't understand a word of either. So Tony Schiavone introduces for him Andre's new executive consultant, and out comes Chavo Guerrero. I thought Vicky Guerrero was Andre's manager. Wasn't that what happened 3 weeks ago and 2 weeks ago?
That was what happened, and I think even they realized they made a mistake.
You don't put shit out on television and then you can't just take it back. That's why you don't put it out on TV unless it means something and makes sense and you want to do that. Now they're fucking this guy. They've signed him as a new ex-WWE star that people might know who the fuck he is, and they're fucking him all around the first 3 weeks. He's got an assistant. Nobody knows his name. Vicky Guerrero's his manager, except she's not, because now her brother-in-law is. I'm sorry. No, that's her nephew.
Her nephew, yeah, because he's Chavo's son.
He's Chavo Sr.'s son, so he would be Eddie's nephew as well. So anyway, but at least Chavo Guerrero can speak. However, what the fuck? He's a massive babyface. The people were chanting for him, cheering him. He not only smiled and spoke like a babyface and thanked them and was happy to be there, but he's being paired with a brand new heel, even though he does a babyface promo, putting over the guy that's acting like a prick. Then they play music, and here comes the Death Triangle. who, of course, apparently are baby faces with a name like the Death Triangle. You got Pac, you got Felix, you got Penthouse. Alex is with them. And the people cheer them because they're just going to cheer everybody because none of this makes any sense and they don't care because they don't believe anything anyway. Pac looks great physically and speaks well. Andre then got marbles in his mouth and it took a long time. And when he finished, Chavo said what he's trying to say is, and then said it. And then Chavo continued to be a reasonable, soft-spoken babyface. Andre muttered some things again, saying that Penthouse and Felix work for Pac, and Pac works for him. We got some Spanish from Felix. They're the face of the Latinos. Penthouse spoke Spanish. The crowd popped because they're in Texas, but none of us knew what the fuck they were saying, so then Alex translated it. Alex should have been the only one speaking, honestly. This would not end. It went for, and then suddenly, this may have been a cue for it to end because this had gone on for a long time, made absolutely no point, and the Death Triangle were walking to the ring, but not nearly being menacing. So all of a sudden, a bunch of referees come out to separate something that's not going on. And that's when the Death Triangle jumps in the ring and gets a little more menacing, but all the referees got in the middle of it, and Andre and his guys just jumped out of the ring. There was no end to the bit, and it went forever and made no sense. What did you think of this?
I don't know what to think. Andrade, the people seemed into him. I don't like Chavo with him as a manager, whatever you want to call it.
Chavo is the most popular guy in the building.
Chavo's a babyface. Chavo's a babyface.
Why is he with this fucking new heel? To make the people like the heel?
I think Chavo has a lot to contribute. I don't know about him being a heel spokesman. I like Pac on the mic. I like him a lot. I like Pac a lot. For a guy that's not the biggest guy, he has intensity. I like his promos. He sounds different. Really good. I don't know what Felix. Now you got me doing it. Phoenix and fucking Penta. Now you got me doing. I was what's called Penthouse.
Felix.
I don't know what they were saying, but Alex was good. I kind of want him not to go too overboard, but he's like, Penta says, and it was done to get the crowd to pop. I didn't like that because I think it's unnecessary, but Alex Abrahantes has been one of the highlights of AEW for the year. And I'm not intrigued enough. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really into this feud. Is this a feud? What is this?
Know.
I don't know what this is.
I don't know.
I didn't really like
it. They can't even decide who's on their own teams, much less who they're mad at. Anyway, we had some highlights of the Hardy family fuckers fighting with Dwarf Dong Sucker and Dino Douche and Jungle Boy and Christian Cage. And Cage does a promo for an 8-man next week. Oh joy, oh bliss. Can't wait to see that.
Well, at least you can plan out your bathroom break.
True. Then the Baker with the bunny took on Pockets. Pockets came back out. And I'll have you know that they spent 10 minutes of national television time for a joke that was worn out 2 years ago. After that, did you love the Jericho interview with Officer Barbrady?
Oh, yeah. This was so great. And I don't know if it got the reaction Jericho thought it would. That's why I think Nick Gage is Jericho. This is all Jericho trying to do stuff that he thinks is good, and it's not. And Nick Gage reeks of Jericho much more than Tony Khan or even Moxley.
Well, you may be right. I may be crazy, but I just might be a lunatic you're looking for. Anyway, the way this started out was because Jericho was going to do a big reveal. So the camera opens up with a close-up on Alex Marvez, a.k.a. Officer Barbrady. And he's staring a hole directly in the camera lens. And his opening comment is, Chris, next week. The only problem is there's no Chris in the shot. he's not looking at where Chris is when the camera pulls out and reveals that Jericho is in the shot. He looks like he's telling the camera that his name is Chris. He's talking to the camera. Chris, next week you're going to take on, and then it widens out and you see Jericho. He's got his back to the camera. And it's still kind of a close-up. You can tell he's got a spiky vest on, but his face is not visible. And he does the promo where he's bringing, since he's facing the most violent, demented person, he's bringing the most violent, demented version of Chris Jericho. And he turns around to face the camera. And he calls himself the Painmaker. And he's got literally the fucking John Wayne Gacy clown makeup where he's got the fucking lines through his eyes from forehead to cheek and lipstick, and he puts a fedora hat on with his spiked Road Warrior vest. He looked like the chairman of the board of a German S&M club. And this is the Painmaker. Did he expect that this was going to somehow get a huge pop from looking like the fucking ashcan drawings of the Joker's makeup in the Batman movie? What the fuck was this?
This was a throwback to something he did a few years ago in New Japan that I didn't like, that a lot of people, for some reason, are like, oh, it's great. Jericho's great over there. And I'm like, no, he looks like shit. His work is sloppy. And this whole Painmaker thing is lame. So now, of course, he's bringing it back to AEW. And even if you were going to do it, if you were going to say, this man, this wrestling legend, is so terrified by the pizza cutter and the pizza delivery man that he'll be wrestling next week, that he is going to come back as this crazy Painmaker character from Japan, I can understand an argument for that. He just had the shit backstage ready to go. The same night this confrontation happened, he just had the spikes and the makeup ready in case of emergency?
Just in case. And also, wouldn't it have helped? Have they ever mentioned this on the television program, that he was the Painmaker in Japan? Or do they just assume, probably because it's true, anybody that would watch this fucking program knows everything that's ever happened in Japan? But the vast majority of people, would they have a clue that Chris Jericho has been the Painmaker? Chris Jericho, Y2J, from WWE television, former WWE champion, guy that beat Stone Cold and The Rock in one night. How far up the list of things that people think of when they think of him is the Painmaker?
I don't know how high up on the list of things it is. I don't think it's very high up at all.
And they've never explained this on AEW television.
I can't say that because it just sounds like the kind of thing Excalibur would throw into commentary. You know, in Japan, he was the Painmaker, and he wrestled at the Tokyo Dome. You know, it just sounds like
nobody listens to excrement. I'm talking about they've never actually had Chris talk about it or videos of such, whatever.
No, he was kind of like a glammed out Jericho at the beginning, and then he went off the rails with the glammed out character, and then he came back as the biker character. And now the Painmaker is a whole new thing.
Maybe you can get Mark Bolan to do his makeup next week.
How dare you disgrace the name of the great songwriter and singer of T-Rex by associating him with Chris Jericho.
I do apologize.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
Also, to all the Bang-A-Gong Get It On fans.
Mambo Sun, that's his best song.
Well, the main event was up next there, fella. The New Japan Pro Wrestling United States Heavyweight Championship on the line in a Texas death match in Texas.
And I told you it was a rematch.
And yes, and they had a Texas death match before, and that's where in Japan or whatever in the fight, this is a rematch. So you were correct. However, I was also correct in that they didn't have a Texas death match. They've advertised a Texas death match in Texas and then don't have a Texas death match. They have a last man standing match. None of these rules relate to a Texas death match in any way, shape, or form. This was called a Texas death match in name only and was a last man standing match. One fall to a finish and either knockout or submission. That's a last man standing match. There's nothing about a Texas death match involved in this. Falls don't count. No time limit, no disqualification, no stopping for blood. The match will continue whether 4 falls or 40 until one man cannot answer the bell. After each fall is scored, there's a 30-second or 60-second rest period. When a man cannot answer the bell for the following fall and a count of 10, he's the loser. That's a Texas death match. So they bait and switched us on this too, but thank God, because I saw one fall of this. I couldn't stand 44. Fucking hell. Moxley jump-started it, of course, and Lance Archer comes down the ring with a kendo stick, and he tries to throw the kendo stick into the ring, but it hits the rope and bounces back on the floor. So Moxley jump-starts it as soon as Archer gets in the ring, beats him up, and then goes out on the floor and gets his kendo stick and starts wailing on him with it. Why was Lance Archer going to, if he'd have brought a AK-47 down, would he have thrown that in the ring so Moxley could get it and shoot him with it? I like Lance Archer, and the people seem to also, and he could get over if he had a half a chance, if he didn't have literally a bloated corpse as a manager who's never allowed to do anything or even say anything anymore, just stand there. And if he'd been booked in any way properly, they could have something with Archer. But now he's out there doing the same thing that the balding plumber of Moxley Plumbing does. They go out on the floor, they fought through the barricade into the arena, up into the bleachers. Same thing he does at every match, Moxley, whether it's a no DQ match or not. Did you see the wonderful, and I'm about to say something is very ironic, and use it, the word ironic, in the proper usage of the term. This was very ironic. Did you see when they fought into the bleachers in the arena and then back to ringside? Lance Archer turns around, picks the fan up, and throws the fan onto Moxley using the fan as a weapon. Did you see that?
I believe so.
This is the company that doesn't want fans involved. Doesn't want fans jumping over the rail, doesn't want fans jumping in the ring, and they work a spot with a planted fan. They did that in ICW, the Poffos did. I believe the year was 1980, possibly 1981. They were at the Henry Clay High School gym in Lexington, Kentucky, which is where they used to have their matches in Lexington. And nobody knew this, but George Weingroff was wrestling for ICW at the time, and George Weingroff had a little brother named Eric. Eric Weingroff, who later on actually refereed in Mid-South for a period of time, was a nice young kid, fresh-faced. At the time that they did this angle, I'm going to say he was 15 years old, maybe, not a big kid. The heels, I can't remember who it was now. I think Rip Rogers may have been involved, but the heels are beating up George Weingroff and his tag team partner, and Eric Weingroff is out at ringside. He's been selling programs or doing whatever, and he walks up to the ring because he's concerned about his brother, but nobody in the crowd knows it's his brother yet. And the heels roll out and grab him and throw him in the ring and start beating him up. They're taping this for television because the angle is going to be, my God, they've beaten up George Weingroff's little brother. Guess what they forgot? They forgot that all those people in that gym had no idea who the fuck Eric Weingroff was and thought that the heels had lost their minds, rolled out and grabbed one of their own and thrown him in the ring and started kicking the shit out of him. And a number of large grown adult men followed him to fucking help out. And I can't remember whether they lost the building for good as a result of the resulting riot, but they definitely got a lawsuit and they had some issues because nobody knew that it was a fucking work because they didn't know who this kid was. So what would it have taken for somebody 3 seats down to go, well, this motherfucker, fuck him. Boom, they're out in the crowd anyway, and then you're in court for the next 5 fucking years. They just have a fan, allegedly, supposedly, hit the ring, and that's goddamn, oh no, we can't have that. But we can have our wrestlers jumping the fans and using them as weapons in their matches. Anyway, so Lance Archer then proceeds to move the stairs out of the way and peel the mats up off the concrete floor while Moxley is sitting there on the apron of the ring watching him, so Moxley can give Archer one of his shitty DDTs on the concrete. And it looked like shit because you can't give a DDT on the concrete. And Archer got color and milked the count out in a Texas death match with no falls scored. They're milking a count out. Moxley got a fork from catering at one of those, is like a white handle picnic fork. This fucking clown wants to be Nick Gage. Moxley, there's no excuse for, I can understand a piece of scum like Nick Gage, dirt poor, so poor he can't pay attention, fucking not in any way smart enough to hold any type of real job, and basically just a schlub that goes through life doing drugs and getting mutilated. But Moxley had a big-time job. Moxley worked for a reputable company. Moxley's made money. Moxley doesn't have to do this shit. He wants to because he's an idiot. And they go to the break there. When they come back from the break, there's 2 chairs and a garbage can in the ring. Lance Archer's down bleeding to death. Moxley's got a garbage can lid. And as he goes to hit Archer, Archer punches the garbage can lid and knocks it back into Moxley's face. Did you see, Brian, what happened next in front of God and everybody on camera?
I believe so.
I encourage everybody, since he didn't try to hide it. Apparently we've gone past the point where we need to do these things in secret. No reason for the magician to actually palm the coin. Let's just see him pull it out of his pocket. It's a trick anyway. Moxley goes down flat on his back with his face up in the air, puts his arms up over his head, reaches up, pulls his blade off his wrist tape, and got his color right on camera. And then gets up and he's bleeding. As long as somebody's bleeding, it doesn't have to be real. It can always, that's the whole death match gimmick. Anyway, isn't it? They're all bleeding for real. We know that. We know nothing else is real. They're all working together and they're hurting themselves for real on purpose and working together to do it. That's the fucking deathmatch mindset. So then they set some chairs up in the ring back to back, and Archer chokeslam Moxley back first onto the edge of the chair backs. What a fucking idiot. And if you get your back fused or your neck fused or whatever, and you can't make this money anymore for absolutely no reason, because nobody's going to remember that bump tomorrow, just remember, Moxley, you're a fucking moron. Anyway, but after 20 seconds, fortunately, it didn't hurt him in this case, because 20 seconds after getting chokeslammed back first on the back of 2 chairs and the point of the small of his back, he was up to his feet. He withstood a Lance Archer big boot, and then just clotheslined the fuck out of Archer and paradigm shifted him because he was fresh as a daisy, and he's running around and he grabs his fork and he stabs Archer in the head 50 times with the fork because nothing's happened to him in this whole match. He's just like he just started. And then Moxley pulls out a board with barbed wire circles wrapped and stapled to it and puts it on the 2 tables that apparently during the break were set up at ringside. And then he pulls another barbed wire board out and puts it on the tables. So plenty of and by the way, this is literally a board with rolls of barbed wire stapled to it. It has no legitimate usage in the real world for anything. It is made up specifically for stupid garbage wrestlers to bump in. There's no real world application for this barbed wire board, is there, Brian?
I can't imagine what that application would be. No.
It's just shit that they make up to take bumps in because they're fucking mental cases. So Moxley puts the fucking boards on the table, but now Archer's got the fork, and he starts stabbing Moxley with the fork. And then, much in the same way as Archer peeled the mats back and moved the steps and then got dropped head first on the concrete that he made, Archer grabs Moxley and choke slams him off the apron into the barbed wire boards and through the tables that Moxley has already set up and won the thing. And this is a guy who has a legitimate job with what is supposed to be a major television wrestling promotion, and he's taking choke slams off the apron through barbed wire and boards and tables to the floor because he's a fucking idiot. This was everything wrong with modern wrestling all in one match, except they didn't have any minute child-sized cosplayers. But otherwise than that, everything that was wrong with modern wrestling was summarized in this match. And that's why I'm saying, why do they need Nick Gage next week? They already bit the head off the live chicken in this match. What are they going to do? The only conceivable reason, even if you have no pride and self-respect and taste and standards, even if you have none of those, the only reason to give Nick Gage a job is to watch him be the goddamn sideshow, freak show geek and mutilate himself. Why wouldn't you leave it to him to do that next week? Why are these guys already doing it now? That's the question I'm asking. What is your answer to that question?
I don't think there is a good answer to that question. I mean, they've done multiple people through tables and back-to-back segments on the same show. It's stupidity. And I agree.
Barbed wire and juice and et cetera, et cetera. They've done Gage's whole portfolio here.
And I was going to agree with what you said earlier. I had the same thought watching this. How much of what Moxley's doing here is what Nick Gage does? It's the same thing. It's the same influence.
Well, I guarantee you one thing, though. Moxley wins out. His better half is much more attractive than Gage's from what I saw from Dark Side of the Ring. That girl's so ugly when she comes in a room, mice jump up on chairs. But otherwise than that, I see no difference between Moxley and Gage except for the one's a bigger budget expenditure than the other one. They're both pretty much the same. One guy, actually Moxley's worse because he has the ability and the opportunity and the chance to get out of that shit and wants to do it. Gage has no other choice. What else is he going to do in life? But Moxley has other choices and specifically does this stuff on purpose. So I think he's worse. Anyway, what in the world's going to happen next week? When are we going to get the answers, Brian, about these people? Are they coming? Are they going? Are they showing up in AEW? Who's going to sign where? What's going to go on with Strong Bro Man? We don't fucking know.
Well, next week we do get Lance Archer against seemingly the gigantic son of Haku, who's bigger than Lance Archer by like 3 inches.
Oh, yeah, I forgot I saw the face-off on that at the end. That'll be interesting as well. Let's see if this boy can go.
I've never seen him.
Well, you're going to see him next week.
That's right.
How big a boy is he? Wait till my brother gets off of work. I'll have you know. Boy, people miss those old cassette tapes, those prank calls. How big a boy is he? Wait till my brother gets off work. He'll pick me up and carry me down there. All right. Anyway, what are we doing coming up this week? What?
We seem to be having a tough time wrapping up the show.
We're going to wrap up. The next show we do is going to be yours, the drive-through.
That's right.
And we'll talk about all kinds of things there.
All kinds of things.
All kinds of things. And then next week we'll come back and talk about Haku's 7-foot son and will the mental case slice Jericho's carotid artery? The debut of the aforementioned bank-addicted drug robber and so much less on next week's AEW. I may watch NXT again, too. And you need to get polishing on your WWE roster because next week we're gonna do the same treatment, I bet you, with AEW.
Okay.
See if nothing else, just to read some of the names that they've actually spent money on will be entertaining.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
All righty then, because that sounded like a full-throated endorsement to me. All right then. In that case, you musical genius, the musical stylings of Emerson, Last, and Palmer will play us out. Thank you. Fuck you. Bye-bye, everybody. Actually, that was better than some of Greg Lake's stuff.